Chapter 74. The Atrocities of Islam. Today I want to prove that Islam is not a religion of peace, but the religion of terror and terrorists. Inaz begins her third and last speech on Islam. According to the Egyptian Muslim scholar, Dr. Raghaib el-Serghani, Islam is the last message of God, in Arabic Allah, to mankind. Allah God orders Muslims to spread this message by their swords and spears all over the world. Allah knows that everywhere people would stand against Muslims and by their swords and spears prevent them from coming to their lands and spreading Allah's final message. Muslims have to fight them, kill them, possess their properties, women and children, and occupy their lands and spread Islam. Based on this, Muslims believe that Allah orders them to invade other countries in order to take the peoples of those countries from the worship of human beings and idols to the worship of their Lord and Creator, Allah, from the injustice of other religions to the justice of Islam, and from their suffering in the world to the happiness of the world. According to the Quran, Muslims are the best community ever created by Allah, Surah 3, 110. The Prophet Muhammad explains why the Muslim community is the best community. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, the verse, "You are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind," means, the best of peoples for the people, as you bring them with chains on their necks till they embrace Islam, Sahih al-Bukhari. So, the Muslim community is the best community because they invade other countries, fight and kill men, and put some of them along with their women and children in chains until they embrace Islam and hence save them from spending their eternity in hellfire, instead securing for them a place in paradise with the beautiful virgins and rivers of wine. No doubt, people would resist, and it is the duty of Muslims to force them to submit to Islam for their own good. Non-Muslims have no choice except to accept Islam or get killed by Muslim invaders. According to Dr. Raghaib el-Serghani, the most countries touched by Islam have encountered the sword. The entire Persian Empire, which today are Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan, were invaded and claimed by the sword and became Muslim. Also, the great Muslim Ghazi or invader, Tamerlane, invaded Khuzestan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and reached up to Moscow. Through the sword, they also opened, invaded, conquered, and captured the Sham, Levant or the Fertile Crescent, today are Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, parts of South Turkey, Anatolia, and Asia Minor. The capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, today Istanbul in Turkey, was opened, invaded and captured, through jihad in the way of Allah. All of Eastern Europe was opened in jihad in the way of Allah, and remained Islamic countries for centuries such as Greece, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Cyprus, Malta, including Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. All of North Africa was opened through jihad, beginning in Egypt, then Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Sudan, Mauritania, Western Sahara, and Western and Central Africa. Through jihad, Muslims also invaded Andalusia, the Iberian Peninsula, today Spain and Portugal, and reached until South France. They also invaded the subcontinent of India, today India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Burma, also called Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. 80 million Hindus were slaughtered by the Muslim Mughals during the Islamic invasions of India. The sword of Islam reached until China. Dr. Raghaib el-Serghani said, many Muslims today are ashamed to admit this fact of spreading of Islam through the sword. According to him, only a few countries such as Malaysia and Indonesia, which Islam came to them through trade. The Prophet Muhammad fought 29 battles, most of them against the pagan Arabs who lived in South, East, and Central Arabia, which used to live outside the Byzantine Empire. He made 2 attempts to invade the Levant, today Turkey, Greece, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Cyprus, Israel, and Palestine, but both attempts were frustrated by the Byzantine army and their Christian Arab allies. His first attempt was a small army of 3,000 fighters. The Prophet Muhammad informed his troops that Allah had promised them possession of the treasures of the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. In order to fulfill this promise, the Prophet sent his military commander, Zayd ibn Harith, former Zayd ibn Muhammad, with 3,000 soldiers to Syria to invade the Roman Empire, and the Prophet knew exactly what they are going to face, and what would be the results. Al-Kimni quoting Ibn Kathir page 241. Muslim historians and commentators refer to the Byzantines as Romans. When the Emperor Heraclius of the Romans heard about the approaching army, he came himself to meet those who dared to come near the boundary of his kingdom, empire, with 100,000 Romans and 100,000 allied Arab tribes living near his border. The huge army of Heraclius killed the 3 leaders of the invading army and many Muslim soldiers. As we mentioned, Zayd ibn Muhammad was among those Muslim mujahideen who were cut into pieces by the swords of the Romans. When Khalid ibn al-Walid saw the defeat of the army, he took the flag of Islam and withdrew with the remaining soldiers and fled to Medina. At the gate of the city, the people threw sand on the returning soldiers and rebuked them for fleeing from battle. Al-Kimni page 470. Nevertheless, the Prophet corrected the people and told them, they have not run away, but they withdrew for the time being. Al-Kimni page 470. The words of the Prophet revealed that he was still insisting on the invasion of the Romans and Caesar. After some time the Prophet himself went to invade Syria with 30,000 soldiers and 10,000 horses. Al-Kimni page 532. When the Muslim troops reached the border of the Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, at Syria, and that Heraclius, the great leader of the Romans, gathered a huge army at Homs city, Emesa, to meet them, the Prophet Muhammad changed his mind and returned to Yathrib, Medina. Ibn Kathir page 178 and Ibn Said al-Nas page 277. In order to find justification for the cowardly withdrawal of the Prophet without meeting the Romans, the narrators of the Sirah, biography of Muhammad, blamed the Jews of a conspiracy. According to al-Bihaqi, the reason which led the Prophet to go to the Romans was a Jewish conspiracy, but Allah saved him from that conspiracy. The conspiracy was revealed to the Prophet through the angel Gabriel, when he reached Tabuk, and hence he cancelled the invasion and returned to Medina. Page 533, Quran, Surah Al-Isra 17, 76-77. Therefore, the promise to conquer the Romans and possess their lands, treasures, and women had not been fulfilled at the time of the Prophet. The Prophet said to his followers, invade Tabuk, you would possess the daughters of the people of the yellow color and the women of the Romans. One of his leaders, Al-Jad ibn Qais said, give us your permission, but do not tempt us with women. Al-Tabari explaining the verse of the Quran in Al-Tawbah 9, 49. The Prophet Muhammad knew that his men became Muslims either through the use of force or for the sake of the war booties, forgetting the women, children, wealth, and properties of the non-believers. As we shall see, all the Islamic conquests, invasions, were motivated by the war booties, especially the women of the infidels. This fact is stated by Dr. Sayyid al-Kimni in his book, The Wars of the Prophet's State. Before the immigration from Mecca to Medina, the message of Islam was based on a peaceful approach with full freedom of faith. It also admonished the faithful to be patient and wait for their rewards in heaven, where there are virgins of paradise and rivers of wine, milk, and honey. After the immigration to Medina, all the followers of the Islamic community, Ansars and Muhajirun, Ansars were the supporters of the Prophet who lived in Medina, and Muhajirun were those who fled with him from Mecca to Medina, were changed into fighters and attackers, a complete state of soldiers and invaders, exactly like the tribe, and with its logic. This is after the allegiance has changed from the tribe and its worshipped ancestor to the state, which represents the men of war and blood. Al-Kimni 2001, page 164. As concerning the change, which brought a sudden increase in the number of the Prophet's followers and led to the victory of Badr, Al-Kimni states that, and here is the most dangerous material change, which played a significant role in attracting the warriors from the weak tribes, after the Prophet's 13-year sojourn in Mecca, inviting people to his faith without much success. At that time, the invitation postponed the promise of enjoyment and abundance to the everlasting paradise. When it has been announced that Allah has given permission to the Prophet and the faithful to possess the wealth of the unbelievers, then the solution became an earthly and material fact, with other tempting gains before the weak among the people. These earthly and material gains attracted many weak people to join the army of the new state. Al-Kimni, page 165. Dr. Sayyid Al-Kimni continues, the Islamic army attacked the tribes in the Arabian Peninsula and subjected them by force to its new state, after terrorizing them so that they have to join the Medinian alliance. Al-Kimni, 1996, page 235. Al-Kimni gives many examples to show how Muhammad terrorized the Arabs and the Jewish tribes and subjected them by the sword to his new state. The Arabs of Bani Salim, that great tribe, fled from their dwelling places as soon as they heard about the approaching Islamic mujahideen. They left behind their houses and cattle. The Muslims stayed 3 days in their houses and returned to Yathrib, Medina, with great booty. Yathrib became known as Medina only after the death of Prophet Muhammad. After his death, Muslims called it Medinat al-Rasul, which means the city of the Messenger of Allah. Before Muhammad fled from Mecca to Yathrib, the city of Yathrib was a Jewish city, just like Khaybar. Sayyid al-Kimni says, Islam divides the world into 2 parts, Dar al-Islam, land of Islam, which are the lands of peace and security that include the Muslim countries, and Dar al-Harab, lands of war, which include all the countries of the world that Muslim army can attack any time whenever there is good chance to do so. Al-Kimni, 2004, page 190. The obligation of jihad began after Muhammad and his followers fled from Mecca to Yathrib. Our history tells us, resumes Al-Kimni, after the immigration of Muslims from Mecca to Yathrib, where the alliances of the Prophet and Banu Hashim from the most able warriors of the tribes of Aws and Hazraj, where the Jewish factories of weapons, and where the good geographic location. The Muslims started attacking the Makkans and the rest of the Arabs. This happened in the form of organized and continuous invasions and attacks. The first attacking group was led by Abdullah ibn Gahash, the father of Zainab, the wife who was shared by Zayd and Muhammad, in which he violated the conditions of the holy months. The group killed, robbed, and took captives from that Maccan caravan. Those attacks and robberies continued in the Arabian Peninsula until turned to Islamic invasions to other countries of the world. In all their offensive battles, the Muslims were always the attackers except in 2 battles, the Battle of Uhud and the Battle of the Ditch. Al-Kimni, pages 190 to 191. The Prophet Muhammad always gets the 1/5 of the booty. Quran Surah Al-Anfal 18, 41. The share of the Prophet was decided for the first time by Abdullah ibn Gahash in his attack on the Battle of Al-Naqla. That battle in which he violated the forbidden months and captured the booty of the caravan. It was the first plunder for the Muslims. Abdullah said, the 1/5 in everything we loot is for the Messenger of Allah and the rest should be divided between us. A Quranic revelation came after that confirming what Abdullah ibn Gahash has decided. Al-Kimni, page 236, Quran, Surah Al-Anfal 18, 41. After the Battle of Badr, it became clear to the Arabs that the attitudes of the Muslims have changed. The Muslims began to go out in ceaseless military campaigns to cut the alliances to Mecca, and the inside trade roads, and attacking the tribes in their dwelling places to terrorize them so that they should cut their alliances with Mecca, and subject them by force to the Islamic State. Al-Kimni, page 238. Sayyid Al-Kimni says, Osama ibn Zayd led another campaign in order to terrorize the Romans, for terrorism is one of the important pillars of Islam and its means to victory. Al-Kimni, page 192. Through this assertion, Dr. Sayyid Al-Kimni admits that Islam is not only spread by the sword, but it is the religion of terrorists and terrorism. While Osama bin Zayd preparing his troops to invade the Roman lands, Byzantine Christian lands, the Prophet Muhammad commanded him, saying, attack them in the darkness of the dawn and fall on them, killing and burn them with fire, and invade them and return with the booties. Al-Kimni, 2004, pages 191 to 192, quoting Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah and Al-Nihaya, pages 139, 143, and Al-Tabari in Tariq al-Rusul and al-Mailuk, page 156. Are these the words of the Prophet of God who supposedly came as mercy to mankind, or the words of Satan the devil? Jesus says, "The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." John 10:10. This shows us, the religion of Muhammad is from Satan and it brings with it stealing, killing, and destruction, whereas the message of Jesus is from God and with it brings love, peace, and life in its abundance. In order to support his point that Islam is the religion of terror and terrorists, Al-Kimni refers to the Prophet's hadiths in which he said, "I have been granted victory through terrorism, I have been sent with the sword between my hands so that no one should be worshipped except Allah, Allah makes my living under the tip of my spear. I have been commanded by Allah to fight and kill people until they bear witness that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." The Quran also supported the sayings of the Prophet in the following verse, "O you who believe! Fight those who are close to you of unbelievers and let them find in you hardness. And know that Allah is with those who believe in Him." Surah 9, 123. After the death of Muhammad, the majority or almost the entire Arabian Peninsula apostatized except for two cities, Mecca and Medina, and one small town, Al-Taif, and a small village, Hagar. The general apostasy followed immediately upon the death of Muhammad. The widely spread apostasy was a natural consequence for the forcible way that the pagan Arabs were compelled to accept Islam on pain of death. 4 prominent Arab leaders and 1 powerful woman declared themselves to be also prophets of Allah. 1. Musaylama ibn Habib, had 100,000 followers. 2. Al-Asdi, had the largest tribe of Banu Asad as his followers. 3. Al-Aswad al-Anisi, had 10,000 followers. 4. Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid, and 5. Sajah bint al-Harith, a female prophetess who had also 100,000 followers. Sajah bint Harith was from a Christian Iraqi tribe named Taqlib. She was beautiful, a master of oratory, poetry, ability to compose verses of prophecies. Sajah and her people were forcibly converted from Christianity to Islam. So, when she heard about the death of Muhammad, Sajah and her people apostatized. Musaylama ibn Habib claimed to be the prophet of Allah many years before Muhammad made the same claim. He had a muezzin, the caller for prayer, and a mosque for praying. Muhammad borrowed many ideas from Musaylama including the caller for prayer and the mosque. The huge numbers of the followers of those self-appointed prophets and prophetess led many prominent companions of the Prophet Muhammad to conclude that Islam died with its founder. Most of the companions of Muhammad told the first caliph, the first successor of Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, to forget about Islam and consider it a story that came to an end with the death of the Prophet. Nevertheless, Abu Bakr insisted to keep Islam going on and vowed to fight everyone for forsook Islam, including those who refused to pay the zakat to him, compulsory tithes. There were 2 kinds of apostasy. One group flatly rejected Islam because they were forced by the sword to embrace it, and the second group continued to be Muslims but refused to pay the zakat to the new Caliph Abu Bakr. The first group was the majority and most of them were now following newly self-proclaimed prophets. Abu Bakr made an oath to fight them and quoted a hadith of the Prophet to justify his decision to kill those who either rejected Islam or those who refused to pay the zakat after the death of Muhammad. The main reason behind such general apostasy was that 90% of the Arabs were forced by the sword to accept Islam against their wishes. Omar, who would become second caliph, stood against the decision of Abu Bakr. He argued that some of those apostates were not truly apostates but Muslims refused to pay the zakat to the new caliph because they were not consulted when he was chosen. Nevertheless, the new caliph firmly decided to go into major battles with those apostates. And his decision began the bloody atrocities which committed under the first Islamic wars of apostasy. Caliph Abu Bakr prepared 11 warring groups for fighting the apostates. He decided to send each group to one apostatized tribe and fight its followers. He knew full well that the Arab apostates were not united under one leadership, and hence fighting them would not be difficult as long as they were fragmented. He first sent one group to fight one of the self-proclaimed prophets. The first group was defeated by the troops of the Prophet Musaylama, and the few survivors fled back to Medina. After that, a second group was sent to fight Musaylama and were defeated too. After his 2 consecutive victories, Musaylama decided to marry the prophetess Sajah and merge her troops with his, giving him a fighting force of 200,000. The prophetess Sajah accepted the proposal, but before their marriage an alliance took place. The Caliph Abu Bakr joined all his remaining 9 groups into one single big army and sent them to fight against Musaylama at the famous Battle of the Yamamah, which took place in December 632. The united Caliph's army was led by the military genius Khalid ibn al-Walid, known as the only sword of Islam. This Khalid would turn out to be the main cause of the defeat not only of the Arab apostates, but he would destroy the Persian army and turn the entire Persian Empire Muslim. He also would defeat and expel the Byzantine army out of the Levant. Khalid's combined troops were defeated twice by Musaylama's fighters before they won the Battle of Yamamah. The victory of Yamamah gave the Muslims the upper hand over the other apostatized tribes. After that, Khalid fought 11 battles against the Arab apostates in Yemen, Bahrain, Oman, south of Arabia, south of Mecca, north of Medina, north of Arabian Peninsula, etc. Many of the apostates were forced back to Islam while thousands were killed. Those surrendered fighters who refused to renounce their apostasy and re-embrace Islam were killed through beheading, drowning in wells, throwing from high mountain cliffs, while many were burned alive. The Islamic Caliphate of ISIS today is doing the same thing to those who are counted apostates among the Syrian and Iraqi soldiers. All the self-proclaimed prophets were slain except the prophetess Sajah. When her fighters were defeated, she repented and returned to Islam. Muslim historians differed about the fate of Sajah. According to one source, Sajah claimed to be a prophetess after learning that Musaylama and Tulayha had declared themselves prophets of Allah. Before claiming to be a prophetess, Sajah was a soothsayer. This source said that Sajah had married Musaylama and accepted his claim to be a prophet of Allah. Khalid ibn al-Walid defeated all the apostates of Sajah and then moved and crushed Musaylama and his followers at the Battle of Yamamah. When Sajah learned that Musaylama was defeated and killed, she repented and returned to Islam. Another source put it this way: when Sajah heard about the death of the Prophet Muhammad and the rise of other false prophets, she decided to use her skills and claim the prophethood foretold in the prophecy of Banu Taqlib. She joined forces with Tulayha al-Azdi and Malik bin Nuwayra, another leader of big Arab tribe. As she grew in power, Musaylama al-Kadhab, nicknamed by Muslims as Musaylama the Liar, invited her to Arabia to consolidate their forces against Islam. According to some reports, they were married, but after a dispute over leadership, Sajah returned to Iraq with her followers. After the defeat of Musaylama al-Kadhab at the Battle of Yamamah, Sajah decided to save herself and her people from the killing machine of Khalid and his ruthless mujahideen, and therefore she convinced her people to repent and return to Islam. According to al-Kimni, the wars of the Caliph Abu Bakr were meant to subdue the Arab tribes who refused to accept his caliphate after the death of the Prophet because they had not been consulted, and hence they stopped paying the zakat. Omar ibn al-Khattab and some of the companions protested against those wars because the tribes were still Muslims and killing them would contradict the hadith of the Prophet in which he said, "I have been commanded to fight all people until they bear witness there is no God except Allah and Muhammad the Messenger of Allah." Al-Kimni page 214. Sayyid al-Kimni resumes, during those wars of apostasy the caliph's fighters had committed hideous crimes in which some Muslims were drowned in wells, others thrown from high mountains, and yet others burned with fire. Al-Kimni narrates a story in which the leader of the Muslim troops, Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the 10 Muslims who had been promised paradise by the Prophet Muhammad, had killed Malik bin Nuwayra, the leader of the tribe of Bani Yarbu, which a large section of the tribe of Bani Tamim. Khalid killed him because he had a beautiful wife. According to the story, Malik bin Nuwayra and his men informed Khalid that they were still Muslims. In order to prove their adherence to Islam, they told Khalid that they had just finished their evening prayer. Khalid ordered them to surrender themselves and lay down their weapons and promised to negotiate the matter with them. When the members of Bani Yarbu tribe surrendered themselves, Khalid ordered his men to kill them all. According to Al-Kimni, Khalid's motive was to kill the leader of Bani Yarbu tribe, Malik ibn Nuwayra, and take his wife, Layla bint al-Minhal, because she was a very beautiful woman. Khalid slept with the woman on the same night he killed her husband, and in that he disobeyed the Quran because he did not wait for the Iddah time, 3 months and 10 days. When Khalid returned to Medina, Omar met him and said to him, "You have killed a Muslim man and taken his wife and committed adultery with her. I swear by Allah I would stone you to death." Al-Kimni, page 217. Nonetheless, the Caliph Abu Bakr did not consider Khalid to have committed murder and adultery and hence did not punish him. Omar did not accept the decision of Abu Bakr and said to Khalid, "You are the enemy of Allah because you have killed a Muslim man and raped his wife." As we shall see, when Omar would become a caliph after the death of Abu Bakr, he takes revenge on Khalid by removing him from the leadership of the Muslim army at Levant. For Al-Kimni, people like Khalid and Abu Bakr should not be given respect because they were not worthy of respect due to their abuses. He further argued that those early wars were falsely forged and are taught to Muslim children in schools to this day as just wars. Al-Kimni, page 219. Those wars were political wars and meant to force the tribes to accept the caliphate of Abu Bakr, which was forced on them. In this regard, Al-Kimni's conclusion is half-truth because the majority of the apostates forsook Islam after the death of Muhammad because they were forced by the sword to become Muslims. Al-Kimni continues to say, any Muslim who protested against Abu Bakr's leadership was condemned as an apostate and deserved to be killed, his wife taken, his money stolen, and his children sold as slaves in the slave market. Al-Kimni, page 248. The decision of Abu Bakr became a horrifying and terrorizing law even today in the Sharia, which takes away the faith of people, condemns them as apostates, reaches their necks, kills them as infidels, exposes their women to rape, destroys their honor, enslaves their children, and robs them of their money and property. Al-Kimni, page 250. No Muslim scholar is prepared to tell the common Muslims that the great companions of the Prophet protested against the Caliph's decision, among whom was Omar ibn al-Khattab, although Omar retreated from his protest when he declared that, "I saw Allah has put the decision in the heart of Abu Bakr and hence I knew it was the truth." Al-Kimni, page 251. Al-Kimni concluded that most of the decisions which had been clothed with divinity and become swords on the necks of the worshippers came as a result of those personal decisions. For example, Al-Bukhari included in his Sahih some hadiths and rejected some hadiths because his heart told him which were right and which were wrong. Al-Bukhari became divine and the author of a divine book which all the scholars agreed is the most authentic book on earth after the Book of Allah, the Quran. Abu Bakr sent another army under the leadership of Amr ibn al-As to the apostatized tribes of Quza and Wadiya and defeated them in the area of Tabuk and Damat al-Jandal. After all the apostates were defeated and subdued, the Caliph Abu Bakr understood that the Arabs might rebel against him again. To mitigate this, he decided to send them out of Arabia, on a mission to invade the Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire. He, more than most, knew and understood that most of them became Muslims singularly for the prospect of war booty, wealth and women. Before Islam was invented by Muhammad, the Arabs were warring tribes which survived in attacking and invading each other. They lived in an arid desert that had scarcely any means of survival. Therefore, they survived in invading and looting one another. They were following a war maxim, which said, "Mn galba salba," which means the winners of any fight have the right to possess the wealth, property, slaves, women, and children of the losers. Muhammad understood the mentality of his people and hence legalized through a false divine claim the maxim of the Arab tribes, invade and win. In short time, he used military force and united all the tribes into one single state, state of Yathrib. As we have seen, after his death many tribes rebelled, but were defeated and brought back by the sword of Islam to the newly founded state of Islam. As we have seen also, the main cause of their defeat was the lack of central authority and unity. The invasions of the early Islamic State, the Caliphate, were many. The mothers of the Islamic books give detailed descriptions of every battle. Prophet Muhammad said, "I have been ordered to fight against people until they say that there is no God but Allah, that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, pronounce the Shahada, or the Islamic creed, they pray, regularly perform the compulsory Islamic prayer 5 times in the day, and pay zakat, blood money. If they do that, accept Islam, their lives and property are safe." Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 33, and Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Hadith number 387. Below is a copy of the message the Prophet Muhammad sent to the Julanda brothers, kings of Oman, through the intermediary of his messengers, Amr ibn al-As al-Sami and Abu Zayd al-Ansari. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. From Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah, to Jafar and Abdo, sons of al-Julanda. Peace is upon him who follows the guidance. Peace be upon the one who follows the right path. I call you to Islam. Accept my call, and you shall be unharmed. I am God's messenger to mankind, and the word shall be carried out upon the miscreants. If you recognize Islam, I shall bestow power upon you. But if you refuse to accept Islam, your power shall vanish, my horses shall camp on the expanse of your territory and my prophecy shall prevail in your kingdom. Muslims in the West often claim that Islam stands for no compulsion in religion and it is the religion of peace. Are not the life and message of their own prophet and his mujahideen fighters contradicting them? As I shall prove in this speech, such claim is false and flatly contradicts the violent message of Islam and how that dreadful Arab religion in short time has spread all over the world by the sword and through jihad. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, "I have been made victorious through terror, and while I was sleeping, the keys of the treasures of the world were brought to me and put in my hand." Abu Huraira added, "Allah's apostle has left the world and now you, people are bringing out those treasures." Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 4, Book 52, Hadith number 220. Again the Prophet Muhammad said, "I have been sent with the sword between my hands to ensure that no one but Allah is worshipped, Allah who put my livelihood under the shadow of my spear and who inflicts humiliation and scorn on those who disobey my orders." Commenting on some verses of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, 191, 193, Surah Al-Nisa 4, 76, 89, 91, Surah Al-Tawbah 9, 5, 12, 14, 29, and Surah Al-Anfal 8, 39, the Egyptian Muslim scholar, Khalil Abdul Karim states, these verses carry serious orders for killing of tribes refusing to believe in the faith that is preached by Muhammad. And from the other side, there are hadiths issued by the Prophet that confirm this meaning very clearly, by which we mean killing anyone who refuses Islam. The Prophet Muhammad said, "I have been ordered by Allah to fight the people until they bear witness that there is no God except Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If they say it, they uphold from me their wealth and blood." In plain language, the price of non-compliance for anyone who refuses to witness or utter the two Shahada Islamic creed, is to lose all protection for his wealth and blood. Accordingly, the killing of one who refuses to utter the two Shahada is an obligation to every Muslim without exception. The message of Muhammad to all the tribes is accept Islam and you will be safe. Any tribe or an individual who refuses this offer would expose himself to physical annihilation and his wealth, women, children, and slave girls would be taken by the Muslims. Khalil Abdul Karim 1999, pages 42 to 44. Before his death, Prophet Muhammad had already made 2 attempts to invade and conquer the Romans, Byzantines. As we have seen, both attempts failed. The first military campaign was led by Zayd, which resulted in his death and the defeat of his small army by the superior army of the Byzantines, 3,000 Mujahideen fighters against 200,000 Roman soldiers. The second invasion attempt was led by the Prophet himself. When Muhammad reached the border of the Byzantine Empire, he was frightened to death when he learned about the superior and powerful army of the Byzantines. Instead of admitting their coward prophet withdrew from the battle because he was scared for his life, Muslim historians invented a different reason. They blamed the Jews of plotting a secret conspiracy to make the prophet fall in the hands of the Byzantines. They said the Jews told Muhammad there was no prophet of God that died before he visited Jerusalem. Prophet Muhammad believed their promise and acted on it. He marched with 30,000 fighters and 20,000 horses and tried to reach the Jewish holy city. At the border his way was blocked by 200,000 Byzantine and Arab soldiers. Fearing for his life, the chicken Muhammad fled back to Medina. Muhammad wanted to invade the Byzantine lands for one single purpose, to capture the women of the infidels and possess their lands and properties, and that he said it again and again in his hadiths. Muhammad inspired his men to war with the basest of motives, using captured loot, sex, and a gluttonous paradise as incentives. He beheaded captives, enslaved children, and raped women captured in battle. Muhammad said in many places that he has been ordered by Allah to fight men until they testify that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. This is the most authentic hadith because it is mentioned in 113 reliable Islamic texts. Both al-Bukhari and Muslim agreed upon it, and that is the highest form of authenticity. Prophet Muhammad used to tempt his Mujahideen fighters with capture of female infidels. Commenting on Surah Al-Tawbah 9:49, Al-Tabari stated, the Prophet Muhammad said, invade Tabuk, the borderline of the Byzantine Empire, you would possess the girls of the yellow people, blonde girls, and the women of the Romans, white women. Al-Jad said to the Prophet, give us permission, and don't tempt us with women. Commenting on the same surah, Al-Tawbah 9:49, Al-Qurtubi said, when the messenger of Allah, Allah bless him and give him peace, was preparing for the battle of Tabuk, he said to him, O Abu Wab, would you not like to have scores of Roman women and men as concubines and servants? He said, O messenger of Allah, my people know that I am very fond of women, and if I see the women of the Romans, the white girls, I fear I would not be able to hold back. So do not tempt me by them. One of his military leaders, a man by the name of Al-Jad ibn Qais, rebuked Muhammad and said to him, do not tempt us with women. Being confronted and exposed before his followers, Muhammad claimed that he has received the above verse from heaven, correcting Al-Jad bin Qais and calling him hypocrite. Surah Al-Tawbah 9:49. While Osama ibn Zayd, commander of Muhammad's army, was preparing his troops to commence the invasion of the Roman Empire and capture the lands of the Jews and the Roman Catholic Christians and the Orthodox Christians, the Prophet Muhammad commanded him, saying, attack them in the darkness of the dawn and fall on them, killing and burn them with fire, and invade them and return with the booty. Ibn Habib in Al-Muhabbar, page 117. Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah and Al-Nihaya, pages 139, 143, Ibn said. Al-Nas in Oriyan Al-Atharig, page 145, Al-Sulai in Rad Al-Anif, page 24, Ibn Hisham, page 245, and Al-Tabari in Tariq al-Rusul and Al-Mailuk, page 156. I have given 6 references to this quotation because Muslims always try to prove that their prophet treated the Jews and Christians as the people of the book and forbade his followers to attack and kill them. Moreover, they say Allah has sent Muhammad as a mercy to mankind. I believe, even Satan, the devil, might not give such evil commands to his demons, as Muhammad commanded his Mujahideen to do to the Jews and Christians. The first rightly guided Caliph Abu Bakr al-Siddiq repeated the same satanic instructions when he sent his Lucifer, Khalid ibn al-Walid, to fight the Arab apostates. Call them to re-embrace Islam. If they refuse, do not spare any one of them. burn them with fire and kill them with force and take the women and children as prisoners of war. Al-Tabari Part 2, pages 258-272. Following the orders of their caliph, Khalid and his fighters killed the surrendered apostates in very cruel ways, and that by beheading some of them, burning others, drowning some in deep wells, and while throwing majority of them from high mountains. As soon as Khalid ibn al-Walid finished the wars of apostasy, the Caliph Abu Bakr sent him to begin invading the lands of the Persian Empire in Iraq and the Byzantine Empire in Great Syria, Levant. At that time, the Persian Empire consisted of Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and many countries in eastern Anatolia and southern Russia. At that time, the Persian Empire was already depleted by its many wars against the Byzantine Empire. Both empires were not prepared to enter in any major conflict. As we shall see, this factor would contribute to the rapid military successes of the Muslim army in its many battles with the Persian and Byzantine armies. In a short period of 25 years, the Muslim state occupied the entire Persian Empire, the Levant, Egypt, and Libya. Khalid ibn al-Walid proved to be a military genius in all his battles with the Persians and Byzantines. According to many historians, Khalid ibn al-Walid had never lost a battle. He was just like Alexander the Great, never defeated in any battle. In one of his early battles, Khalid said to the Persian leader in Iraq, "We come to you with men who love death as your men love life, therefore, submit to Islam and you would be spared." This statement is repeated today by the fighters of ISIS and other Islamic terrorists in every battle they wage. They always claim to be fearless fighters who love death. This statement revealed two important facts. Firstly, at that time, Muslims were in high spirits of fighting. They loved to fight because they believed that if they won they would get the 4/5 of the booties, women and wealth of the infidels, and if they died they would go to paradise and get the 72 virgins, and rivers of wine, milk, and honey. Secondly, the Persians were not willing to fight at all. They had to be forced to remain in the battlefields. In one battle, called the Zat as-Salasil, the Battle of Chains, the fighting Persians were chained to each other because their leaders knew that they would flee otherwise. Khalid ibn al-Walid fought 16 battles in Iraq against the Persians. Due to his military prowess, he won them all. Every Persian who refused to accept Islam was killed. Many Persians were converted to Islam out of fear for the sword of Khalid. Today their descendants are the Muslim Iranians and Iraqis. In short time, all the inhabitants of Iraq became Muslims and the country automatically became part of the newly founded Islamic State of Medina. Later on, the capital of the Islamic Caliphate became Baghdad city in Persia, today the capital city of Iraq. Muslims gained so much weaponry and booties in those battles. Medina was flooded with the loots and women of the defeated Persians and Arabs. Muslim historians proudly mentioned that at the time of the fourth Caliph Osman ibn Affan the people of Medina became filthy rich until the Jariya, female slave or female captive of war, was sold in pure gold equals her weight. According to Sayyid al-Kimni, the pure gold of that highly priced Jariya was looted by the sword from the sweat of a poor Iraqi farmer and a hard-working Syrian shepherd boy. In other words, the Muslim mujahideen through their habitual raids and invasions had robbed the cattle, wealth, and properties of the people of Iraq and Syria and became filthy rich. Their main goal wasn't only a religion they wanted to spread by the sword, but they wanted to steal and rob the wealth, properties, women, and children of the Persians of Iraq and the Christians of Syria. In one particular battle, Muslims defeated the Persians and captured many women, children, huge plunders, and one elephant. When the elephant was brought to Medina, the Arab women asked their men whether that huge thing was created by Allah or made by human beings. It is just like, when the Native Americans saw the European settlers riding on their horses, they wondered how those white people made their dogs so big. When Abu Bakr saw that Khalid won all the battles against the Persians, he decided to send him to invade the Byzantine Empire. Khalid left half of his troops in Persia and took the other half and moved to Syria, with 9,000 fighters. Abu Bakr had already sent an army under the leadership of Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah. Abu Ubaidah's army had already fought 4 small battles with the Byzantines and won 2 and lost 2. When Khalid arrived at Syria, he took over the leadership of the Muslim army. The Caliph Abu Bakr was the one who ordered that Khalid to be the main leader of the 2 joined Muslim armies at Levant. Khalid then fought 5 small battles against the Byzantines and won all of them. According to the Muslim scholar, Dr. Raghib el-Surgani, Khalid ibn al-Walid fought 11 battles in the Ridda Wars, Wars of Apostasy. He also fought 16 battles against the Persian armies and defeated them in all. In Alias battle, Muslims killed 70,000 Persians. Abu Bakr moved Khalid from Iraq to the Sham, Levant, to fight the Romans, the Byzantines. Muslim historians and commentators call the Byzantines, the Romans. This is because the Quran calls the Byzantines, the Romans. There is one surah in the Quran called Surat al-Rum, see Quran Surah the Romans 30. If the Quran from God, then why its author confused the Byzantines for the Romans? No historian would make such silly mistake. The first major battle between the Muslims and Byzantines was called the Battle of Ajnadian, Jordan today. According to Dr. Raghib el-Surgani, there were 100,000 Romans against 33,000 Muslims. Caution: Muslim historians always exaggerate the numbers of the enemy. Before the battle, the Byzantine commander in charge of the battle asked the leader Khalid, "Why do you come to fight against us? Why don't you go and invade Ethiopia or Persia?" He even proposed to help the Muslims to invade the Persians. Then, he resorted to bribery to prevent the battle. He told Khalid that he was ready to pay each Muslim soldier 2 dinars, pair of clothes, pay 10,000 dinars to Khalid, and 20,000 dinars to the Caliph Abu Bakr. Khalid rejected the offer and insisted on the fight. He gave the Byzantines 3 choices: convert to Islam, pay the jizya to Muslims in pure gold, or the sword, fighting. The Byzantines rejected the first 2 choices and went to battle at Ajnadian. Of course, the Byzantines were not willing to fight and hence Muslims got the upper hand and defeated them. They killed 3,000 Byzantines. Shortly after that battle, the first Caliph Abu Bakr died and Omar ibn al-Khattab took over. The second Caliph Omar immediately removed Khalid ibn al-Walid, the so-called Saifullah or Sword of Allah, and reappointed the former leader, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah instead. Omar justified his decision by saying that he was worried that Muslims began to put so much trust in Khalid rather than Allah. The majority of them were thinking that without Khalid they couldn't win any battle. Although Khalid was removed from the leadership of the army, but in reality he continued to be the brains behind any military maneuvers. Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah took no action or made any decisions without consulting Khalid. In the main decisive battle of the Yarmouk, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah disobeyed the decision of the second Caliph Omar and stepped aside to give Khalid autonomous control. According to other source, the Byzantine king asked Mu'az ibn Jabal, "Why do you come to our countries and want to fight against us? Why don't you go and invade Ethiopia? We can help you to invade and defeat the Persian Empire." Mu'az ibn Jabal said to the Byzantine king, "God said we have to fight those who are close to us first and then we would go to fight those who are far from us." In fact, Mu'az ibn Jabal had based his reply on a verse of the Quran which commands Muslims to fight unbelievers, "O you who believe! Fight those who are close to you of unbelievers and let them find in you hardness. And know that Allah is with those who believe in Him." Surah 9, 123. The Byzantine king offered to give a lot of money and clothes to the Arab Muslims if they agreed to forsake their fight with them and return to their countries, but the Muslims refused and insisted on fighting. The Byzantine army was not ready to go into major battle after the massive battle that fought against the Persian army in which it lost half of its military power a mere 25 years ago. Also, the Byzantine Empire lost 1/3 of its population due to the plague which was known as the Black Death. 30 million people died in that deadly plague. All those factors combined together discouraged the Byzantines of fighting the invading army of Muslims and eventually contributed to their defeat in 3 major battles against the Muslims: Battle of Ajanadian, Battle of Fal, and Battle of the Yarmouk. In the final Battle of the Yarmouk, according to Dr. Raghaib el-Sergani, Muslims killed 140,000 Christian fighters. All the army of the Byzantine consisted of Greek Christians and Arab Christians. In fact, Muslims killed only 50,000 and 90,000 jumped to their death off the cliff when they had no place to flee from the killing machine of the Muslim army. Once again, it was Khalid who chose the battlefield, and he knew that there was only one way out for the Byzantines if they were defeated. The defeat of the Battle of the Yarmouk ended the control of the Byzantine Empire of Syria. The Byzantine Emperor, Heraclius, accepted the fact that the defeat of his army at the Battle of the Yarmouk was God's decision and a result of the sins of the people of the land, including his. Heraclius took to sea on a ship to Constantinople in the night. It is said that as his ship set sail, he bade a last farewell to Syria, saying, "Farewell, a long farewell to Syria, my fair province. Thou art an infidel's now. Peace be with you, O Syria, what a beautiful land you would be for the enemy." Battle of the Yarmouk. The Emperor Heraclius had correctly interpreted the defeat of his army, the loss of his lands, and the rapid spread of Islam as the scourge of God. According to most historians, the Arab Christians did not show much resistance to the invading Muslims' troops. Some historians went further than that and claimed the Arab Christians in fact gladly welcomed the Muslim Arabs and assisted them to occupy their lands because they were ill-treated by the Byzantine Empire. There was a religious disagreement about the nature of Christ, one nature versus 2 natures, and that difference led to many persecutions of the Arab Christians by the Greek Christians. During the Muslim siege of the second largest city Damascus, which was considered the second capital of the Byzantine Empire after Constantinople, the Arab bishop of Damascus helped Khalid ibn al-Walid to enter the city. He informed Khalid that the Byzantine soldiers were having birthday party of a big military general and they were fully drunk and spent the entire night in orgy. Ever helpful, the bishop supplied ladders to Khalid and hence assisted him take the city. After the capture of Damascus, only Palestine and Lebanon still remained in the control of the Byzantines. Muslim troops went on to lead a siege on Aliyah. Jerusalem continued to be called by that name after it had been renamed 7 centuries ago by the Roman Emperor Hadrian. Jerusalem was renamed again by the Muslims and became known as Al-Qudus. When the city refused to surrender, Muslims used catapults and rained large stones on the city. At that time, only Christians dwelt in the city. Jews were forbidden from dwelling in Jerusalem. Most of them lived in small towns in Palestine. The inhabitants of Aliyah agreed to surrender, but they said they would surrender the city only to the Caliph Omar himself. Omar accepted their demand and came in person and received the keys of the city. When the Christians of Jerusalem surrendered to the Muslims and agreed to pay the jizyah, one of their conditions to the Caliph Omar was not to allow any Jew dwell with them. Jews were allowed to come as pilgrims but not to stay in the city. Nonetheless, the city opened its doors to the Muslims and allowed them to dwell side by side with the Christians. Caliph Omar made an unfair pact with all the Arab Christians of Levant and made their religious leaders to sign it in every city and town and to abide by it. That infamous treaty is known as Omarian Pact and continued to be the guiding principles for centuries to come that govern the relationship between the Christians and Muslims. The renowned Muslim commentator of the Quran, Ibn Kathir, commenting on Surah Al-Tawbah 9:29, states, "Paying the jizyah, by the Jews and Christians, is a sign of kafir, unbelief, and disgrace." Allah said, "Until they pay the jizyah," Surah 9:29, if they do not choose to embrace Islam, with witting submission in defeat and subservience. Prophet Muhammad said, "Do not initiate the salam, the greeting, to the Jews and Christians, and if you meet any of them in a road, force them to its narrowest alley." This is why the leader of the faithful Omar bin al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, demanded his well-known conditions, in the Omarian Pact, be met by the Christians, these conditions that ensured their continued humiliation, degradation, and disgrace. These are the unfair conditions that the Caliph Omar bin al-Khattab forced the Arab Christians to write and abide by it against their wishes. I am quoting 10 of those unfair conditions, which Omar forced the Christians to write and abide by them against their wishes. They are 22 articles. You can find them all in the internet. 1. We shall not build, in our cities or in their neighborhood, new monasteries, churches, convents, or monks' cells, nor shall we repair, by day or by night, such of them as fall in ruins or are situated in the quarters of the Muslims. 2. We shall give board and lodging to all Muslims who pass our way for 3 days. 3. We shall not manifest our religion publicly nor convert anyone to it. 4. We shall not prevent any of our kin from entering Islam if they wish it. 5. We shall show respect toward the Muslims, and we shall rise from our seats when they wish to sit. 6. We shall not mount on saddles, nor shall we gird swords nor bear any kind of arms nor carry them on our persons. 7. We shall clip the fronts of our heads. 8. We shall not display our crosses or our books in the roads or markets of the Muslims. 9. We shall not raise our voices when following our dead. 10. We shall not build houses overtopping the houses of the Muslims. In spite of those unfair conditions of the Omarian Pact, still the Christians of Levant preferred to be under the Muslim rule rather than the Christian Byzantine rule. As we have mentioned above, according to Ibn Kathir, the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab made those unfair conditions with the Nasara of the Sham, Christians of Levant. In fact, the Quran and Hadiths of Muhammad never call the followers of Christ, Christians. Until today, Islam addresses them as Nasara. Nasara means the followers of the sect of the Nazarenes, a derogatory name given by the Jews to the early followers of Jesus of Nazareth. The Jews who rejected Jesus refused to call him Christ and refused to call his followers Christians, but called them Nasara. In order to humiliate, degrade, and disgrace the Nasara, the second Caliph Omar forced them to accept those conditions because they refused to accept the prophethood of Muhammad. After the defeat of the Byzantine army and capturing the main 2 cities in Levant, Damascus and Jerusalem, 2 important occurrences took place. The Caliph Omar was killed by a Persian Muslim convert as revenge, and a deadly plague began in a small village in Palestine called Emmaus, which killed 75% of the Muslim soldiers who participated in the jihad at Levant. The plague killed many soldiers and leaders, including the chief commander of the Muslim armies, Abu Ubaidah al-Jirah. Khalid lost 18 of his sons in that deadly plague. He made many Arab, Christian, and Zoroastrian women, widows and children, orphans. He murdered 2 leaders and raped their wives on the same day he killed their husbands. He died a broken-heart man. He continued to lament the loss of his sons, and while he was dying in his bed he said, "I am dying as an old she-camel dies. For the Arabs that is the worst and the most shameful death. I believe the plague was the punishment of God for the atrocities that Muslim mujahideen had done in Persia and Levant." It wasn't a coincidence that the plague started in the village Emmaus, in which Jesus had a supper with 2 of his disciples after his resurrection, Luke 24, 13-32. According to the historian, Bachelor, the invasions of Muslims to the Levant region resulted in the destruction of churches and monasteries, the sacked towns, the fields laid waste, the villages burned down, by the Arabs who were overrunning the country. Bachelor, the decline of Eastern Christianity by Islam, From Jihad to Simitude, London, 1996, page 44. Thousands of Christians died of famine that resulted from those attacks. Michael the Syrian mentioned that, Omar sent Khalid with an army to the Aleppo, Halab, and Antioch region. There they murdered large number of people. No one escaped them. Whatever may be said of the evils that Syria suffered, they cannot be recounted because of their great number, for the Arabs are God's wrath. Michael the Syrian, Volume 2, page 421. Muslims interpreted their rapid victories over the armies of the 2 superpowers at that time, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire as divine favor. Nevertheless, historians pointed to many factors which contributed to the quick defeats of the Persians and Byzantines. The long-lasting wars between those two rival empires exhausted their military powers and financial resources. The Byzantine army was not ready to go into major battle after the massive battle that fought against the Persian army, in which it lost half of its military power, decimated by a previous battle. Besides, the victory of the Arab Muslims over the Greek Byzantines was facilitated by the enemy within, the Arab Christians. Some of the Arab Christians smoothed the progress of the Arab Muslim troops by their unwillingness to resist their advance and by literally helping them through spying and supplying the needed assistance to enter the fortressed cities such as Damascus and Jerusalem. The assassination of the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab. Omar used to warn his leaders and governors not to send any slave or a newly convert Muslim to his capital city in Medina. He feared one of their number, deprived of their wives, children, and relatives, might seek revenge on him. He called non-Arab people, al-Alug, which means dirty and unclean people. So in every letter he ordered his governors to keep the al-Alug out of his reach. In spite of his fears and orders, one of the so-called al-Alug managed to reach him and take revenge for his family and children. The Wikipedia gives us good introduction to this person who murdered the highest religious authority of the emerging Islamic State. Piraz Nahavandi, which means Piraz the Victorious. He also known by Arabs as Abu Lu'lu'ah al-Nahawandi. They also call him Abu Lu'lu'ah al-Fayrizi, Abu Lu'lu'ah the Persian. He was a Persian soldier who served under the commander Rustam Farrukhzad, but was captured in the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 636 AD, when the Persians were defeated by the Arab Muslim army of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab on the western bank of the Euphrates River. After he was brought to Arabia as a prisoner and slave, he managed to assassinate Umar in the Hijra year 23, 644-645. Abu Lu'lu'ah the Persian was one of the men who were taken captives in the city of Nahawand, in today Iran. The Arab Muslims destroyed his house, family, children, and his country without them having done no evil to them. After he lost everything, he had been taken as captive to al-Muqarra ibn Shaba to work as his slave. For some reason al-Muqarra sent him to Medina. When he reached Medina, he was grieved to see the captive children of his city and country and other countries filling the streets of the city. He searched with heavy heart for his children among them but could not find them. The crying of those wretched children increased his grief. According to the Muslim historian Ibn Sa'd, Abu Lu'lu'ah used to meet the children of captivity, and whenever he saw them he used to cry and feel their heads with his hands and say, "The Arabs ate my liver." Then he killed Omar as a revenge for what he had done to the captives. Ibn Sa'd, Al-Tabaqat al-Kubra, Volume 3, page 271. Abu Lu'lu'ah murdered the Caliph Omar inside the mosque during the morning prayer. He pretended to be a Muslim and entered the mosque to pray behind the Caliph Omar. While the Caliph and the rest of the Muslims were kneeling in their prayer, Abu Lu'lu'ah stopped his prayer and moved forward and stabbed the Caliph Omar to death. He stabbed him 6 times in his neck, chest, and stomach. He used a poisoned dagger to kill the devil incarnate, the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab. Abu Lu'lu'ah knew and understood there was nothing could avenge the evils that the Muslim Mujahideen had done to him, to his family, and to his Persian people than hitting the serpent on its head. It was the same method and for the same reason that the prophet of Satan, Muhammad, was poisoned by the Jewish captive girl, Zainab bint al-Harith, who sent him to hell before his time. Otherwise, that false prophet would have lived longer and taught more evil teachings. During the Caliphate of Omar, Muslim Mujahideen, the so-called holy warriors of Allah, invaded many countries and reached from Isfahan in Persia, today Iran, to Tripoli in Libya. In the Islamic year 14, lunar year, Damascus, Homs, Emesa, Baalbek, and al-Basra were invaded and conquered. In the year 15, Syria was invaded and the Muslim Mujahideen defeated the Romans, the Byzantines, in the Battle of al-Yarmouk, and conquered the Persians in the Battle of al-Qadisiyah. In the year 16, they invaded Al-Awaz and Al-Madin in the Battle of Jawala, and the Persian emperor was defeated and ran away in the Battle of Yazidigar. In the same year, Takrit in the east of Iraq was invaded. Likewise the Muslim army invaded Kanserine, Halab, Aleppo, Antakya, Antioch, Sorug and Kirkasa. In the year 18, Gondabsior, Jawan, Al-Rahad, Simisa, Haran, Nasibiat, Al-Mosul, Mosul, and Al-Jazira between Iraq and Syria were invaded and looted. In the year 19, some lands of Caesar, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, were conquered and captured. In the year 20, the Islamic Mujahideen invaded western part of Egypt and the city of Taistar in Iran. In the year 21, Alexandria in Egypt, Nahawand in Iran, and Barqa in Libya were invaded. In the year 22, Muslim Mujahideen invaded Azerbaijan, Al-Dinir, Masabtank, Hazan, Al-Rai, Askar and Kamwams in the middle of Asia, and Tripoli in Libya. In the year 23, in which the Caliph Omar was assassinated by Piraz the Victorious, the Muslim Mujahideen invaded Kerman, Sajistan, Makran and Isfahan. In those many bloody battles, thousands upon thousands of innocent people were murdered by the bloodthirsty Muslim Mujahideen. Many women were raped and many children enslaved and sold as slaves in the slave markets. Many houses were burnt and looted and thousands of families were destroyed. The Muslims robbed and looted the treasures of those places and distributed the wealth, women, and children among themselves. It was not a religion that they wanted to preach, but to rob, to enslave, and rape. This reminds us of the teaching of the Lord Jesus Christ about Satan, in which he said, "The thief, Satan, comes not but to steal, to kill, and destroy, but I have come to give life and life in its abundance." John 10:10. If we compare the peaceful preaching and spreading of the gospel of Jesus by his apostles Peter, Paul, and the others among the pagans of the Roman Empire and the spreading of the sword of Islam among the Christians of the Byzantine Empire and the Zoroastrians of the Persian Empire, for sure, the above verse of Jesus makes clear distinction between the work of Satan, killing, stealing, and destruction, and the work of God, giving life and life in its abundance. It is estimated that, during the 5 centuries of the spread of Islam, 272 million people were killed, of whom 80 million were Hindus and 60 million were Christians. In order to know how much damage and destruction those Muslim shayateen, devils, had done in those countries they had invaded, read Al-Tabari in his huge volumes, Al-Tarikh, or the History, and Al-Tabaqat al-Kubra by Ibn Sa'd. One of those Muslim Mujahideen, an Arab man by the name of Mahafaz, narrated one of his experiences in the battles. In the year 16, he participated in the Battle of Jawala in Iran. He said, "We entered the city and I saw a woman like a deer in her beauty, and her face shines like the sun. I took her and her clothes and she became my Jariya, slave girl." Al-Tabari Volume 4, pages 26 to 27. The aims of those battles and invasions were not only to enslave and rape the women of those conquered countries but also to loot their treasures. In few years the companions of the Prophet Muhammad became filthy rich, that their wealth were counted in millions of dinars, today millions of US dollars. Before the advent of Islam, the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula were living in abject poverty and continuous starvation. They used to suck the stones in order to slake their thirsty throats and dry tongues. They also used to drink their camels' urines and sometimes their own urines to quench their thirst. The Byzantine commander understood the problem of those Muslims who came to fight him and hence offered money and clothes to them, but they refused to accept them because they wanted the fertile lands of Levant, the Fertile Crescent, and the women and children of the Christians. In short period, their invasions made them very rich and enabled them to possess the lands, women, and children of the so-called infidels. Just a few examples would show how much those companions stole from those countries they invaded. When the third Caliph Osman ibn Affan was murdered, he had 1,000,000, and 500,000 of dirham and 100,000 dinar. This is equal in our today counting millions of dollars. Al-Zubair ibn al-Awwam had 51,000 dirham, 51 million dirham and 200,000 dinar. Besides that, he had houses and estates in Alexandria, Basra, and Kufa, capital of Iraq. When he died, he left behind him large garden. If it had been sold, it would have brought thousand and 600,000 dinar. $1,600,000, a billionaire. Abdul Rahman ibn Awf, when he died, he left gold that they used axes to cut. Saad ibn Abi Waqqas left behind him 250,000 of dirham. Ibn Masud left 90,000 dirham. Talha ibn Abi Abdullah had in his hand a ring of gold, which has diamond in it. His daily income from his land in Iraq was 1,000 dirham. When he died, he left 2,200,000 of dirham and 200,000 of dinars. He also left 100 jars full of gold. Omar ibn al-As, he was the one who invaded Egypt, he left behind him 70 jars of pure gold. While he was dying, he offered his gold to his sons, but they refused to accept it because they believed it had been taken unjustly, looted. When Zayd bin al-Harith died, he left behind him gold that had been cut by axes. This is the same adopted son, Zayd ibn Muhammad, whom the selfish alleged prophet of God lusted after his wife, Zainab bint Jahash, and forced him to divorce her so that he could marry her. References for the above quotes: Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, pages 53, 76, 77, and 157, Al-Masudi in Mira Oy al-Zahab Volume 1, pages 544 to 545, and Kitab al-Makarizi, Volume 1, pages 140 and 564. The Islamic bloody invasions continued after the assassination of the second Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab. Before the Caliph, Omar was justly killed, by Abu Lu'lu'ah al-Fayrizi, Piraz the Victorious, who administrated the vigilante justice. A Muslim leader led his troops without informing the Caliph Omar and marched toward the invasion of Egypt. At first, the Caliph Omar expressed his disapproval of such step without his permission. Nevertheless, when the Caliph learned that his leader, Amir ibn al-As, had succeeded in invading Alexandria, he gave his approval of the campaign. There are two important things to mention regarding this invasion. First of all, Amir ibn al-As informed the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab that he found a very large library in Alexandria which had over 1 million books. The Caliph replied back and instructed him that every book that doesn't honor Islam and exalt Allah, burn it. At that time, the Alexandrian library was the greatest and largest library in the Western world. It contained books on theology, philosophy, history, and various branches of science. Following the order of the Caliph of Medina, Amir ibn al-As set all the books aflame. It said that the fire and smoke continued for 6 months before every book was fully consumed and destroyed. The decision of the second Caliph of Islam became a guiding principle for Muslim troops wherever they went. Everywhere they went, they destroyed Christian churches and Hindu temples and burned to ashes the infidels' libraries. Sometimes, beautiful churches' buildings were spared and converted into Muslim mosques. In this regards, the contemporary Indian philosopher and historian, Swami Vivekananda says, their watchword is, there is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Everything beyond that not only is bad, but must be destroyed forthwith, at a moment's notice. Every man or woman who does not exactly believe in that must be killed, everything that does not belong to this worship must be immediately broken, every book that teaches anything else must be burnt. From the Pacific to the Atlantic, for 500 years blood ran all over the world. That is Mohammedanism, Islam. This speech delivered at the Shakespeare Club of Pasadena, California, USA, on February 3, 1900. The Coptic Christians of Egypt agreed to pay the jizya to the second caliph, and therefore he allowed them to continue following their religion. The Caliph Omar appointed Amir ibn al-As the Wali of Egypt, the governor. Initially, Amir ibn al-As did something which made all the Copts to be happy. It happened to be their great spiritual leader, the Patriarch of Alexandria, the Pope of the Coptic Orthodox Church, Benjamin went into hiding for 11 years from the Byzantine authority. The Copts approached Emir Ibn al-As and requested him to restore their fugitive patriarch Benjamin. Emir accepted their request and restored their spiritual leader. But, such a favor met with another huge demand of jizya by the Caliph Omar. Emir Ibn al-As tried to convince his caliph that he was demanding too much from the Copts of Egypt. The caliph said, "Enriching of the Medina is more important than robbing and destroying the entire Egypt." In other words, rob the Christians of Egypt and enrich the Muslims of Medina, the capital of the Islamic Caliphate. After the assassination of the second Caliph Omar, he was succeeded by Osman ibn Affan. During the Caliphate of Osman, Muslims invaded Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and reached up to Morocco. The Berber tribes of North Africa caused a serious problem to the Muslim invaders. Whenever they invaded a city and forcibly converted its inhabitants from Christianity to Islam and moved to the next city, the former city would apostatize and become Christian again. Then, they had to return and reinvade and reconvert the citizens of that city. Many Berbers were killed during those processes. The Berbers managed to murder the main military commander of the Muslims, Uqba ibn Nafi. He was the nephew of Emir ibn al-As. He was ambushed and killed by Kausala, leader of the Araba tribe of the Berber people and the Christian head of the Sanjia Confederation. Meanwhile, the third rightly guided Caliph Osman ibn Affan was murdered inside his house by Muslims due to his corruption and bad leadership. One of his murderers was the son of the first Caliph Abu Bakr al-Siddiq. That murderer was known as Muhammad. Later on, Muslims captured him and killed him in a very horrific way. They opened the stomach of a donkey and inserted the body of Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr inside the belly of the donkey until he died of suffocation. So far, by God's grace, two rightly guided caliphs and their false prophet were murdered for the evils they had done to innocent people. Some reliable Shiite sources mentioned that the first Caliph Abu Bakr also was poisoned by some Muslims, which caused his untimely death, just 2 years after his false prophet died of poison too. The same sources claimed that the daughter of Muhammad, Fatima al-Zahra, was poisoned by the Caliph Abu Bakr and died 6 months after the death of her father. As we shall see, the fourth rightly guided Caliph, Ali ibn Abi Talib, would be dispatched by Muslims in the same fashion. Those immediate 4 successors of Prophet Muhammad were named the rightly guided caliphs because they were supposedly directly guided by Allah. No other Muslim caliph, sultan, or king ever received that honorable and divine title except Abu Bakr al-Husayni al-Hashimi al-Qurshi al-Baghdadi, the spiritual, political, and militarily leader of ISIS, today Islamic Caliphate. Ali ibn Abi Talib was appointed the fourth and last rightly guided caliph. Ali's caliphate did not last for long before he was also assassinated by another Muslim. After the death of Ali, his rival Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, Wali, governor of Syria, declared himself caliph and began the Umayyad dynasty, which made Damascus its main capital. After the death of Caliph Muawiyah, his son Yazid became caliph, and after him the caliphate passed from father to son, just same as kingship or monarchy. The Umayyad caliphs ruled the Muslim world for approximately 370 years, that includes their rule in Harran and Cordoba. Muslim mujahideen did not only kill the so-called infidels, but they engaged in internal conflicts among themselves and massacred each other like wild beasts. Islamic history books are full of many massacres that Muslim leaders fought against each other. During the wars of apostasy between Abu Bakr's mujahideen warriors and the Arab apostates, Aisha's army against Ali's fighters, Ali's troops against Muawiyah's mujahideen fighters, and throughout the history of Islam until the Turks against the Arabs, and Mongols against the Arabs and Turks, etc. At the time of the Caliph Yazid ibn Muawiyah, the Muslim troops invaded Mecca and destroyed the Black Kaaba, the house of their Allah, by the catapults, and raped thousands of young Muslim girls. The Muslim historians Ibn Sa'd, al-Tabari, and al-Waqidi narrated that the soldiers of Yazid ibn Muawiyah broke 1,000 Muslim girls' hymens in one single day, mass rape. After the Umayyad caliphs came the Abbasid dynasty, which lasted for another 1508 years, until the last Abbasid caliph was killed by Hulagu Khan, the general commander of Genghis Khan's army. The Abbasid caliphs took revenge on the Umayyad clan and wiped out of existence every creature belonging to that family. Reliable Islamic history books mention that even those dead and gone Umayyad caliphs' bones were exhumed out of their tombs and made to stand trials. Then, each caliph's bones, going back to the first caliph Muawiyah, was severely scourged by whips and then burned into ashes. One of those cruel Abbasid caliphs was a gay and had a boyfriend. His male lover wasn't gay like him. The homosexual caliph warned his male lover against cheating on him. He strictly forbade him to never fall in love, have sex with any woman, touch any female jariyah, or marry any girl. In those days, gay marriage was not yet invented. The abominable gay marriage is the invention of our time. The Abbasid caliph's palaces were full of beautiful jawari, female slaves and female captives. In each palace you could see teenage girls from all over the known world, Arab girls, Persian girls, European girls, Indian girls, African girls, etc. Mostly, those foreign girls were female captives of those defeated and killed infidels. They would be ordered to walk bare naked inside the palace courtyards and gardens. The caliph, his male relatives, and his top officials could grab a girl at any time and anywhere and rape her. Islam doesn't require him to marry her or even apologize to her because she is his right-hand possession, chattel and slave. He wouldn't care if she dies during the rape process. Just like a dog attacked a bitch or a cook a hen. Some of those Abbasid caliphs would brag among their royals and officials that they had never have sex with the same girls they deflowered. Each one of them, any time he wanted to deflower a brand new virgin. During those notorious adulterous and rapists, Abbasid caliphs, the famous classic book Alf Layla wa Layla, 1001 Nights, known in English as Arabian Nights, was composed. Despite all the evil deeds done by those criminal Abbasid caliphs and their bloodthirsty mujahideen, still the Abbasid dynasty is called the Golden Age of Islam. The gay caliph found out that his own sister was impregnated by his male lover. The two were having secret affair which escaped the notice of the homosexual caliph. At once, the outraged lover killed his male lover and refused to allow anyone to bury his body. He put the body of his male lover on a bridge and remained sitting near him and weeping throughout the night. I don't know what to make out of that sad love story. Should we blame the homosexual Muslim caliph who murdered his beloved, or his male lover who cheated on him, or the sister who fell in love with the lover of her brother and committed adultery with him? Let us leave it here and not get distracted any further by the like of such nonsense affair and return to our narration of the bloody Islamic invasions. When Uqba ibn Nafi was murdered by the Berbers in North Africa, the Umayyad caliph in Damascus sent a new Muslim military commander, Musa ibn Nasir, Moses the son of a small Christian. From his name it is clear that Musa was born as a Christian but converted to Islam. His story of conversion began when he was a small boy living in a monastery in Syria with some Syrian monks. He was under training to learn the Bible and theology and then to become monk. Khalid ibn al-Walid invaded the monastery and took him as captive after slaughtering all the monks. Then, Khalid converted him to Islam and made him a slave in his house. Being converted and brought up by such outstanding military general of Islam turned out to be a great honor for Musa ibn Nasir. The Christian boy was brainwashed and turned into a bitter enemy of Jesus Christ and his followers. When he was grown up he became himself an outstanding military general of the Islamic troops. He was assigned by the Umayyad caliphs the task of reclaiming North Africa to Islam. Musa ibn Nasir learned from the mistake of the slain leader, Uqba ibn Nafi, and started to move slowly and convert the Berbers to Islam. The Berbers today are known as Amazigh. Uqba converted the entire region of North Africa, today Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, in just a few months. Musa ibn Nasser took a few years to accomplish the same task. After subduing and converting the Berber tribes from Christianity to Islam, Musa ibn Nasser began to think of moving to the Iberian Peninsula, today Spain and the Republic of Portuguese. Musa knew that he was growing old and such task needed a young and strong commander. Surprisingly, such a commander turned out to be one of the defeated and subdued Berbers, Tariq ibn Ziyad. Those who fought for so long against the Muslim invaders and tried by all means to keep their Christian faith in a few years were turned into Muslim invaders themselves. Tariq ibn Ziyad was a fierce and successful Muslim commander too. He was nicknamed the Khalid ibn al-Walid of the Berbers. The newly resurrected militarily genius, Tariq ibn Ziyad made a solemn vow to convert Europe entirely until Rome and capture it for Islam. Muslims claimed that the Prophet Muhammad promised them that they would invade and open Constantinople and Rome, the two great capitals of Christendom, and turn the entire Christian world Muslim. History shows they tried for 7 centuries to invade and capture Constantinople, but they failed. Nonetheless, the so-called prophecy of their false prophet was partially fulfilled when the Ottoman Sultan, Muhammad II, Muhammad the Conqueror, captured and destroyed Constantinople in 1453 AD, modern-day Istanbul. After they brought an end to the Byzantine Empire, the Muslim Ottomans destroyed half of Europe in order to fulfill that satanic prophecy, but it didn't work. Muslims still hold to the false prophecy and believe one day they would invade and take Rome, the capital of Italy and the center of the Roman Catholic Church. Tariq ibn Ziyad succeeded in invading Spain and converting thousands of its population into Islam. According to Dr. Bill Warner, in Spain, Muslims made piles of Christians' heads, slain in battle, that men on horsebacks could not see each other across. Tariq continued to take city after city, and in short time he converted the majority of the population into Islam. It seemed that Tariq was truly possessed by the spirit of the ruthless Muslim general Khalid ibn al-Walid, who defeated the Byzantine army and entirely destroyed the Persian Empire and converted its population to Islam. Tariq needed more troops because the Iberian Peninsula was too big for his small army of 12,000. He sent for his master and leader, Musa ibn Nasser, who was living in the city of Al-Qayrawan, in today Tunisia. Musa forwarded the demand of Tariq to the Caliph at Damascus. By this time the capital of the Islamic State was changed twice. From Medina was moved by the 4th Caliph Ali to Kufa in Iraq. When Ali was murdered, it was moved by the Caliph Muawiyah to Damascus. Finally, the Abbasid caliphs would move it back to Baghdad, today the capital of Iraq. When the Muslims of Arabia and Levant heard that a big door for jihad in the way of Allah was opened in Europe, hundreds of thousands of them gathered from Yemen, Iraq, Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Palestine, and Egypt. The numbers of the new mujahideen had far exceeded what Tariq needed. Wherefore, the Caliph selected 18,000 strong fighters and sent the rest back to their places. After supplying the new troops, the Caliph sent a letter and demanded that Tariq ibn Ziyad should send to him 3,000 blonde virgins, young white girls. As soon as the letter reached Tariq ibn Ziyad, he fulfilled the demand of his Caliph and sent the 3,000 captured Christian teenage girls. This established direct relationship between Tariq and the Caliph of Damascus, which led him to ignore the orders of his master, Musa ibn Nasser, the Wali of North Africa. Musa understood that Tariq was pulling rank in him. Out of jealousy, he commanded Tariq to stop his rapid conquests and wait for him until he reached Andalusia, the ancient name of the Iberian Peninsula. Tariq ibn Ziyad refused to obey and continued to conquer city after city. I wonder when Tariq and his satanic mujahideen were invading, killing, raping, looting, pillaging, enslaving, burning, destroying, and converting the Christians of Spain to Islam by the sword, why the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, the kings of Europe, and the Byzantine Emperor at Constantinople were silent and showed blind eye to the slaughter and suffering of their Christian brothers and sisters in the Iberian Peninsula. When Musa ibn Nasser reached the newly conquered lands with an army from Morocco under the leadership of his son, they also invaded many cities in the western region before they met with Tariq ibn Ziyad. When Musa ibn Nasser reached Tariq ibn Ziyad, he humiliated him in front of his troops. He tied him with ropes and flogged him severely for daring to disobey his orders. Most probably, the news of this fight between those two big military commanders reached the ears of the Caliph at Damascus. Therefore, without giving any explanation, the Caliph ordered both commanders to halt their jihad invasions and return immediately to Damascus. When the two reached Damascus, Tariq ibn Ziyad mysteriously disappeared and no one knew anything about him. Musa ibn Nasser was sent to Mecca for pilgrimage and also died mysteriously in Medina. The disappearances of those two ruthless commanders diminished the military power of the Muslim armies in Andalusia and finally led to their crashing defeat by the Frankish king, Charles Martel, the mayor of the palace, at the Battle of Tours, in October 732 AD. The Battle of Tours was fought between the huge Muslim army under the leadership of Abdul Rahman Ghaifigi of 30,000 mujahideen and the Frankish army of 25,000 soldiers. Muslim historians exaggerated and put the number of the Frankish army to 400,000. The Muslim army continued to advance in Europe and invaded South France. It kept on conquering, pillaging, looting, raping, enslaving, forcibly converting, and advancing until it reached 30 miles away from the capital city, Paris. On their way to Paris, the Muslims invaded many Frankish villages, towns, and cities and collected huge amount of booties. Many of the Muslim mujahideen felt that they had gotten enough spoils and needed to go back to Andalusia and return another time to invade the capital of the infidels. Nevertheless, their commander, Abdul Rahman Ghaifigi, insisted on continuing to Paris. He believed in the promise of his false prophet that great and blessed Muslim commanders were going to invade and capture Rome and Constantinople. At the time of the Battle of Tours, the Islamic military power reached its zenith. By then, it was the most powerful army in the entire world. At that time, Europe was not united under one military power. Therefore, the leader of the Moors was entirely full confident of victory. Arabs, Berbers, and Christians of Andalusia who were converted to Islam were known as Moors. The Franks were just wanted to defend their country from the invading army. When the two armies met and the battle began, the Moors were showing superiority and the battle in their favor. Charles Martel, the commander of the Frankish army, understood the mentality of the Muslim Moors and knew exactly where their weak point lay. He understood that the Muslims were fighting for the booties, especially the women and wealth of the infidels. That interest did not surpass their interest in converting the infidels to Islam. They knew that if an infidel converts to Islam, then they cannot take his women and wealth. But, if he remains infidel, then they have the right to either kill him and get all his possession, women, wealth, cattle, and property, or force him to pay the jizya in gold. Modern historical research proves that the early Muslim mujahideen never carried copies of the Quran with them, but had only their swords, spears, and horses on them. Before the Battle of Tours, the Moorish mujahideen had already accumulated huge heaps of booty. The Moors were kept their booty at the rear, leaving a few mujahideen guards. Charles Martel, with a small excursion force, attacked the booty, killing the Muslim guards and set the huge heaps of the loot on fire. The Moors felt as if someone was setting their own families on fire. Accordingly, they broke their ranks and ran to save their booty. Such action led to confusion among the Moors. Their leaders lost control of the ranks. Immediately, the Franks ambushed the Moors and began to kill them. Some historians said that the Moors were so confused until they began to kill each other. Their main commander, Abdul Rahman Ghaifigi, was also killed in the melee. When their commander was slain, the Muslims began to flee from the battleground, leaving their booty and dead. It was a great victory for the Franks. Charles Martel emerged as a great hero and a savior of the West. He was nicknamed by the Pope of Rome, Charles Martel, which means Charles the Hammer. The Pope borrowed the name from the Jewish commander, Judas Maccabeus, in Hebrew Judas the Hammer, who defeated the Syrians under Antiochus IV, in 165 BC and rededicated the temple in Jerusalem. Many historians believed that the Battle of Tours saved Christianity and the Western civilization. Some historians also believed that, had the Moors won the Battle of Tours, Europe would be today an Arabian continent and the Europeans would be Muslims speaking Arabic. The causalities of the Frankish army were 1,100 dead while the Muslim army lost 12,000 including their main leader, Abdul Rahman Ghaifigi. After the defeat of Poitiers or Tours, Muslim Moors never dared again to invade France or try to advance in Western Europe. However, they continued to attack Constantinople for 700 years until they captured and destroyed it in 1453. Millions of the citizens of the Byzantine Empire fled to Europe and Russia. Those who remained were forcibly converted into Islam. Today the 99% of the Muslims of Turkey were once Orthodox Christians of Anatolia, which was part of the lost Byzantine Empire. Some historians said that the Second Rome, Constantinople, did not fall but it moved to Russia and Moscow became the Third Rome. According to Dr. Bill Warner, Islam always inspires fear in the hearts of Westerners. How North Africa changed from being a Christian to a Muslim. How the Arab countries changed from Christian to Muslim countries. 25 years before the advent of Islam, the Persians and the Byzantines had massive war in which 1/3 of the population died. 1/3 of the Byzantine Empire was destroyed by the Black Death, or bubonic plague. Dr. Bill Warner said, there were 548 battles waged by the early Islamic Mujahideen. According to Dr. Bill Warner, the classical Western civilization did not collapse because of the invasions of the Germanic tribes, but it had been destroyed by the Islamic invasions. Muhammad sent fighters to all Arab tribes to offer them Islam. If they refused to accept the offer of Islam, they were summarily annihilated. Muhammad sent his chief commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid, to the largest Arab tribe known as Jazima. Khalid destroyed the entire tribes because they rejected the offer of Islam and decided to fight. Their women and children were taken as captives, women got raped, and children sold in slave markets. At the Battle of Qadisiyah, in July 636 AD, Khalid cut the head of the Persian commander and raped his wife on the ground. Her husband's blood was spilled. Khalid followed the example of his prophet Muhammad, who killed at the invasion of Khaybar, the Jewish leader, Rabia ibn Kinana, Sik Kinana ibn Rabia, and took his wife, Safiyyah bint Huwai, and raped her on the same day he murdered her husband. During the Wars of Apostasy, Khalid killed an Arab leader, known as Malik ibn Nura, cooked and ate his head, and raped his wife at the same time. At the Battle of Ula, May 633 AD, in Iraq, Khalid and his troops continued to put the losers of the battle in bags and cut off their heads until the river ran red with their blood. The entire Persian army of 30,000 to 35,000 were slain by Muslims. Before the beginning of that bloody battle, Khalid had prayed to his Lucifer Allah, "O Lord, if you give us victory, I shall see that no enemy warrior is left alive until their river runs with their blood." The Battle of Ula is also known as the Battle of Blood River because the water of the river Euphrates became red of the blood of the many slain Persians. There was a story narrated by Muslim historians which shows how cruel and evil Khalid was towards the infidels. In one battle against the pagan Arabs, Khalid with his sword dripping blood chased an Arab leader and tried to kill him. When the leader found himself being cornered and has no way of escape, he threw his sword and shouted loudly, "I bear witness there is no God but Allah and Muhammad his messenger." It means he pronounced the Shia Islamic creed, and declared himself Muslim. Even though, Khalid reached him and struck off his neck. When the news reached the ears of the Prophet Muhammad, he rebuked Khalid for killing a person who pronounced the Shia. Khalid said to Muhammad that the slain leader pronounced the Shia because he scared of death. The Prophet said to him, "Have you opened his heart and seen that he said it out of fear for his life?" In his book Al-Riyad al-Nadira, Al-Tabari mentioned that the Arab tribe of Banu Salim had reneged, apostatized from Islam, whereupon the Caliph Abu Bakr al-Sadiq sent them Khalid ibn al-Walid, who gathered their men inside animal sheds, then set them to fire. Dr. Bill Warner continued to say that the second Caliph Omar's troops invaded Levant and also Jerusalem, and those Jews and Christians who refused the compulsory offer of Islam were turned into tzimmis, third-class citizens and semi-slaves. The tzimmis are the Jews or Christians who agreed to pay the jizya in pure gold to Muslims. Majority of the Arab Christians could not afford to pay the heavy jizya and hence forcibly converted to Islam. During the so-called Golden Age of Islam, during the Abbasid dynasty, Muslims attacked the Sindh region in India and killed 26,000 Hindus in one single battle. Armenian nobles fled and took refuge in a church. The building was destroyed and all were burned inside. At Ephesus city, 7,000 Greek Christians were enslaved. All new churches were destroyed. In Egypt and Syria 30,000 churches were burned down and completely destroyed. In Thessalonica, 22,000 Greek Christians were enslaved. In Seville, thousands of Christians massacred. 6,000 Jews of Morocco killed. Hundreds of Jews in Córdoba killed. 4,000 Christians of Granada killed. Georgia and Armenia invaded. In another battle in Hindustan, India, 15,000 were killed and 500,000, 500,000 Hindus, enslaved, majority of them young girls and children. In Yemen, the Jews were given two choices: convert to Islam or die. Christians of Granada were deported to Morocco. In India, many cities destroyed, Hindus were told to convert or die. Muslim commanders boasted among themselves about who would make the biggest and tallest hills of Hindu skulls. Some of them gained the titles of idol smashers. Thousands of Hindu girls were raped and untold numbers of children enslaved. In one town, 20,000 enslaved. Buddhist monks butchered, Buddhist nuns raped by Muslim mujahideen. Damascus and Safed were invaded and mass murdered Christians. In Marrakesh Jews were massacred and in Tabriz Jews were forcibly converted. Cairo riots led to churches being burned. The Mongol Muslim commander, Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, killed as many as 90,000 Hindus in one single day. No one in the entire human history was able to kill 90,000 people in one day except that ruthless Muslim commander, and perhaps second to him comes the atrocity of the nuclear weapon, known as the Little Boy, that was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan, and killed in one single day 70,000 people. Tamerlane gained the title, the most evil man ever lived. In another battle, Tamerlane massacred 30,000 surrendered Hindus in cold blood. He devastated 700 Hindu villages. Tamerlane also invaded Iraq and completely annihilated Nestorian and Jacobite Christians. Half of the population of Afghanistan were Christians, but Tamerlane made it completely Muslim. Another Muslim leader, called Tughlaq, took 180,000 Hindus as slaves. After 700 years of continuous attacks, Islam captured and destroyed Constantinople in 1453. The son of Tamerlane, Babur invaded India and destroyed thousands of Hindu temples and forced conversions. Muslim generals built 2 tall towers of human heads after their victories. Noble Hindu women committed mass suicides to avoid sexual slavery and rape. According to Dr. Bill Warner, the Jews of Persia, modern-day Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and Yemen were forced to convert and followed by forced conversions of Greek Christians to Islam. In Persia also persecutions of Zoroastrians increased and those who survived the massacres fled to India. In India, 600,000 Hindus killed by Akbar, the greatest Muslim Mughal emperor. Jews of Jeddah expelled and Jews of Morocco massacred. Forced conversions of Jews in Iran. Zoroastrians were annihilated in Iran. Jews of Baghdad massacred. About 250,000 Armenian Christians were slaughtered in Turkey. In the 20th century over 1,500,000 Turkish Armenian Christians were killed in jihad, the Armenian Genocide of 1915, also known as the First Holocaust. In 15 years, the entire Persian Empire was defeated and converted to Islam. In 25 years Islam spread from China to Tunisia, in North Africa. Nevertheless, Islam could not destroy the entire Byzantine Empire. In short period, Islam took 2/3 of its lands, Levant, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain. No empire in human history lasted as long as Byzantine Empire. It lasted for 1,123 years. The Roman Empire lasted for 800 years, Ottoman Empire for 500 years, and the Chinese Manchu Empire for 300 years. The Emperor Justinian built the Dome of Hagia Sophia. The Byzantine Empire stretched from Serbia, Bulgaria, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Israel, Palestine, Syria, and part of Italy, and had 1,000 cities. Unfortunately, the demise of this great empire was caused by the Fourth Crusade. In 1204, the Republic of Venice hired the Fourth Crusaders from French, German, and Italian contingents. Instead of liberating the Holy Land from Muslims, those crusaders invaded and sacked Constantinople. The Byzantines considered them to be brothers in the Christian faith and hence they were not prepared for the attack. After invading and controlling Constantinople, the Crusaders continued to rob and steal the wealth of the empire. For 50 uninterrupted years, all the treasures and gold of the empire were carried away. Besides that, earthquakes and plagues weakened the empire. The city, Constantinople, recovered after 50 years, but the Byzantine Empire would never recover from the barbaric assault of the Fourth Crusade. In the year 1453, Sultan Muhammad II of the Ottoman Empire used cannons and destroyed the 3 walls of Constantinople. Those cannons were made by a Christian Westerner who sold himself to the Muslim Sultan Muhammad. That traitor approached first the Byzantine Emperor and offered his new weapons. When the Byzantine Emperor could not afford to give him what he wanted, he turned to the enemy and sold his deadly merchandise to them. The cannons allowed Ottomans to finally destroy the 3 walls of the strongly fortified city. When Sultan Muhammad II took the city, he gathered all the rich citizens and chopped off their heads and had their bodies thrown to the dogs. It is said that the Sultan killed the rich citizens of Constantinople because they refused to lend money to their emperor to purchase the cannons. The Muslim Ottomans laid a siege to the city with an army of 200,000 men. At that time, Constantinople was defended by 7,000 men, of whom 2,000 were foreigners. The Sultan's troops were Janissaries, Turks, and Anatolians. Janissaries were Christian children who were kidnapped by Muslims from Christian villages, towns, and cities. Then, those kidnapped children were brainwashed and converted to Islam. After that, they were trained in military warfare. Those children would grow up without family attachments and they were loyal only to the Ottoman Sultan. Then, they would send them to invade Christian lands. They were known as the killing machine. The Sultan used them to destroy half of Europe and Asia. Through them, the Ottoman Empire captured all Arabia and North Africa. Accordingly, they were the main cause behind the defeat and capture of Constantinople, which marked the demise of the greatest Western Empire. The Byzantine Empire used to have 1,000 cities. Therefore, the battle marked the end of the greatest empire in human history, an empire that lasted for 1,123 years. The city's fall was a massive blow on Christendom. Pope Nicholas V immediately ordered counterattack, but his sudden death put an end to that plan. Many Greeks fled the city and migrated to other parts of Europe, in particular Italy. Their arrival in Western Europe ignited the Renaissance and the Reformation. Many scholars believed that the fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages. Many Greek Orthodox Christians fled to Russia. Russia became the spiritual successor of the Byzantine Empire. Some historians said that the Great Byzantine Empire did not fall, but it moved to the east and Moscow became the Third Rome. The year 410 AD was considered the year Rome first fell when the barbarians invaded it. Historians believed that the Western Empire, the Roman Empire, did not fall until 476 after the barbarian leader, Odoacer deposed the last emperor Romulus, and that marked the final fall of Rome. Odoacer established himself leader over Italy. The glory of Rome was ended when a pagan leader made himself a king in Rome. In fact, at that time only the western half of Rome fell. The Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, continued to exist in the area called Byzantium. The Crusades. Many secular writers try to find many reasons to blame the Church for sending the Crusaders to liberate the Holy Land from the Muslims. It is true that some of the Roman Catholic Crusaders committed hideous crimes against innocent people. They committed atrocities against their fellow Greek Orthodox Christians of Byzantine Empire. They also committed genocides against the Jews of Europe and those in the Holy City, Jerusalem. They also indiscriminately killed many innocent Muslim women, children, and elderly. In retrospect, the Crusaders' crimes were a far lesser evil in scale compared to the huge genocides and mass murders committed by Muslim mujahideen everywhere their feet took them. It is estimated that the Islamic conquests or invasions led to the death of 60 million Christian and 80 million Hindu. Some historians put the number of the Islamic deaths up to 272 millions. In fact, some historians claimed that Muslims killed more Muslims than they killed non-Muslims. Initially, the Crusades against the Muslim lands were meant to push back the Turks who invaded and captured many Christian lands. The call for the Crusades was initiated by the Byzantine Emperor. The Emperor Alexios Komnenos I sought the help of the Pope of Rome, Urban II. He asked for knights to assist his troops kick the Muslim Turks out of his lands, which they recently invaded and captured. The Pope Urban II seized the opportunity and declared a universal holy war against the pagans, Muslims, who were living in the Holy Land. In one of his public sermons, he likened the Holy City, Jerusalem, to a virgin bride that has been defiled by the unholy pagans, the Muslims. Instead of a few trained knights, 500,000 people responded to the call of the Pope and began their holy march towards Palestine. None of them were trained soldiers. As such, many were killed by the Turks as soon as they reached Anatolia. Some of them died of starvation and fatigue. Not a single one survived. The Roman Catholic Church immediately denounced them as the Peasants' Crusade and prepared the First Crusade, which was headed by the French nobles and their well-trained armies of knights. The Peasants' Crusade was led by a priest known as Peter the Hermit, who knew nothing about war, and none of his million followers knew how to fight. The majority of his army consisted of small children and women, and large number of them unarmed. They were pilgrims rather than soldiers. As soon as they arrived at Anatolia, the pilgrims were ambushed and cut to pieces in detail by the Turks, who were more disciplined, at the Battle of Civito. Despite Peter's pronunciations of divine protection, the vast majority of the pilgrims were slaughtered by the swords and arrows of the Turks, or were enslaved. In 1095 the Pope Urban II proclaimed the First Crusade with the stated goal of restoring Christian access to holy places in and near Jerusalem. Following the First Crusade there was an intermittent 200-year struggle for control of the Holy Land, with 7 more major crusades and numerous minor ones. Roman Catholic Europe mounted no further coherent response after the fall of the last Christian stronghold, Acre 1291. The military crusades were a 200-year struggle between the Roman Catholic Europe and the Islamic sultanates of Anatolia, Levant, Palestine, and Egypt. It produced great heroes from both sides such as Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. By the year 1000 AD, 2/3 of the Christian world was possessed by the Muslim invaders. Out of the important 5 ancient Christian cities, 3 were taken by Muslims: Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria. Only Constantinople and Rome still remained in the hands of Christians. Muslims believed these cities too were destined for them. They claimed that their prophet Muhammad told them that they were going to invade and possess Constantinople and Rome. Islam became the superpower of the medieval world. Each year brought forth new invasions and new possessions of Christian lands. In 1071, the Turks invaded Asia Minor and possessed the region of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. The inhabitants of this large region were new converts to Islam. They were Christians before they were invaded and forcibly converted by the sword. They were like the Berber tribes of North Africa. They were not Arabs, but had migrated from Asia to the region of Asia Minor. They became more zealous than those who had converted them. They behaved like the Muslim Mongol Great Ghazi, Great Invader, Tamerlane, who turned against other Muslims and invaded and captured their countries. After their forcible conversion to Islam, the Muslim Turks turned against their Arab masters and attacked them. They took Syria and Palestine from the Arab Muslims and began their own Muslim Caliphate, the Ottoman Sultanate or Empire. But, since the Prophet Muhammad said in one of his authentic hadiths, only an Arab Muslim from Quraysh tribe can be appointed caliph, therefore the Turks called their caliphs sultans and their caliphate sultanate. The last Arab caliphate was destroyed by the Mongols, under Genghis Khan, in 1258. On February 13, 1258, Hulagu Khan, the main general commander of Genghis Khan's troops, invaded Baghdad and assassinated the last Abbasid caliph, Al-Mustasim Billah, and ended that 500-year-old caliphate. Nevertheless, the Mongols picked up the virus and soon they too would be converted to Islam and would wreak havoc of unceasing Islamic invasions and convert millions to Islam in Asia and East Europe and Russia. Those invasions were done by Tamerlane, the most evil man ever lived. We see the same pattern with the Berbers, Turks, and Mongols, all forcibly converted to Islam, contaminated to a greater degree, spreading their increasingly virulent contagion. Tamerlane was a Mongol warrior who was Turkishist and a convert to Islam. He claimed direct descendant from Genghis Khan. The name Tamerlane is an English corruption to his real name Timur the Lame. He was known as Timur the Lame because when he was a young boy he stole a sheep and got shot with a bow by a shepherd, and that rendered him lame the rest of his life. Tamerlane means Timur the Lame. At first, Tamerlane called himself the Sword of Islam. According to Islamic tradition, the honorable title of the Sword of Islam was bestowed by the Prophet Muhammad on his military genius, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Tariq ibn Ziyad was nicknamed Khalid ibn al-Walid of the Berber tribes. After conquering many lands in Asia and Europe, Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, decided to declare himself the new Muslim caliph, but was told by Muslim scholars that he couldn't be a caliph, because he wasn't an Arab. In fact, not every Muslim Arab can be a caliph unless he was from the tribe of the Prophet Muhammad. According to Muhammad, his caliph, successor, must be a Muslim man, an Arab man, and a direct descendant of the Prophet's tribe of the Quraysh. Since the last Abbasid caliph was captured and put in a sack and trodden underfoot and brutally killed by Hulagu, Genghis Khan's chief commander, no Muslim man has ever claimed to be a caliph except the contemporary Muslim terrorist leader, Abu Bakr Hussein al-Qurayshi al-Hashimi al-Baghdadi, the leader of today's ISIS, the Islamic State or Caliphate. For 756 years no one has claimed that honorific except this terrible leader of the most evil terrorist group ever produced by the religion of peace. Accordingly, young Muslim men and women migrate from all over the world to Turkey, Syria, and Iraq to join the army of the newly resurrected Islamic Caliphate. Al-Baghdadi claimed to be legally caliph, 100% Qurayshi man. Following his defeat of the Christian Knights Hospitallers and the capture of their stronghold city of Smyrna, Tamerlane changed his title from the Sword of Islam to the Greatest Muslim Ghazi, which means the greatest Muslim invader. He established a Muslim empire that extended from Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, until Kashgar in China. It reached up to Moscow in Russia and Delhi in India. He made his capital in an oasis in the desert in a city known as Samarkand, today the capital of Uzbekistan. His Islamic invasions had caused the deaths of 20 million people. After their victory in the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, the Seljuk Turks defeated the Byzantine army and captured Anatolia and Armenia. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks invaded and destroyed Constantinople and ended the Byzantine Empire. Islamic invasions of Europe were halted at the gates of Vienna in 1683. September 11, 1683, was the day when an alliance of Christian armies led by Jan III Sobieski, the King of Poland, arrived at the gates of Vienna, and changed the victory of Muslim Mujahideen into crashing defeat. For that reason, Osama bin Laden chose September 11 to carry his cowardly attacks on the Twin Towers at New York. He wanted to tell the Christian world that Islam still determined in conquering the Western world and changing it into a Muslim world. Many Westerners are ignorant of their past history and hence believe that Islam is a peaceful religion which spread through mere preaching. George Santayana said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." It seems only President Donald Trump has learned and remembered his past. Majority of people in America and around the world are against his travel ban of refugees and 7 majority Muslims countries: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, and Somalia. Today, in Western schools and universities, Christianity is presented to the students as bloody religion that caused the death of millions and for long time blocked scientific discoveries and progress. On the contrary, the Muslim Moors of Spain are taught to students as more knowledgeable and advanced in science, art, medicine, and philosophy than the medieval Christianity which behind the Dark Ages of Europe. Before the Battle of Vienna, the Muslim Mujahideen, the Ottoman Turks, overrun Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia. They turned Protestant Hungary into a compliant vassal and made war repeatedly on Austria and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The Ottomans set their eyes on Vienna, since the fall of the city would open the way into the heart of Austria and southern Germany. Their final target was Rome, the capital of Christendom. They knew if they capture Rome, the second capital of the Western world, then Christianity is doomed. They had failed to take the city, Vienna, in the siege of 1529. Under the leadership of the Grand Vizier, Pasha Karim Mustafa, and with their Tatar and Malaysian allies, they made their preparations and fought their way towards the capital, overrunning Austrian towns and villages. Wherever the Muslim Mujahideen went, they plundered cities, took slaves, turned churches into mosques, and converted many thousands of Christian captives to Islam at the point of a sword. In 1683, the combined armies of the Ottoman Empire, large and well-equipped forces, laid siege on Vienna. The city was nearing the end of its ability to resist, but just the capture of Vienna was becoming a matter of time. An army came to its rescue. On September 12, in an open battle before Vienna, the Muslims were defeated, and the city escaped pillage and destruction. The chief commander of the army that rescued Vienna was the Polish king, Jan Sobieski. His decisive victory is like that of Charles Martel's victory at the Battle of Tours, Poitiers, in 732 AD, which stopped the advance of Muslim Mujahideen in Western Europe. Likewise, the Polish king, Jan Sobieski, saved Christianity and Western civilization. But, Muslims never give up until today. In the past they failed to defeat Christendom, but today they are invading the Western world through mass immigrations, influx of illegal immigrants, and multiplying from within through polygamies and lack of birth controls. Muslims in Europe have created no-go areas in many major European cities that are off-limits for non-Muslims. Writing about those no-go zones cities in Europe, Soher Kern states, many of the no-go zones function as microstates governed by Islamic Sharia law. Host country authorities effectively have lost control in these areas and in many instances are unable to provide even basic public aid such as police, firefighting and ambulance services. The no-go areas are the byproduct of decades of multicultural policies that have encouraged Muslim immigrants to create parallel societies and remain segregated rather than become integrated into their European host nations. In Britain, for example, a Muslim group called Muslims Against the Crusades has launched a campaign to turn 12 British cities including what it calls Londonistan into independent Islamic states. The so-called Islamic Emirates would function as autonomous enclaves ruled by Islamic Sharia law and operate entirely outside British jurisprudence. In the Tower Hamlets area of East London, also known as the Islamic Republic of Tower Hamlets, for example, extremist Muslim preachers, called the Tower Hamlets Taliban, regularly issue death threats to women who refuse to wear Islamic veils. Neighborhood streets have been plastered with posters declaring, "You are entering a Sharia-controlled zone, Islamic rules enforced." And street advertising deemed offensive to Muslims is regularly vandalized or blacked out with spray paint. Muslim immigrants are taking control of other parts of France too. In Paris and other French cities with high Muslim populations, such as Lyons, Marseille, and Toulouse, thousands of Muslims are closing off streets and sidewalks, and by extension, are closing down local businesses and trapping non-Muslim residents in their homes and offices, to accommodate overflowing crowds for Friday prayers. Some mosques have also begun broadcasting sermons and chants of Allahu Akbar via loudspeakers into the streets. In Italy, Muslims have been commandeering the Piazza Venezia in Rome for public prayers. In Bologna, Muslims repeatedly have threatened to bomb the San Petronio Cathedral because it contains a 600-year-old fresco inspired by Dante's Inferno which depicts Muhammad being tormented in hell. In the Netherlands, a Dutch court ordered the government to release to the public a politically incorrect list of 40 no-go zones in Holland. The top 5 Muslim problem neighborhoods are in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Utrecht. In Germany, Chief Police Commissioner Bernhard Witthout, in an August 1 interview with the newspaper Der Westen, revealed that Muslim immigrants are imposing no-go zones in cities across Germany at an alarming rate. In Sweden, which has some of the most liberal immigration laws in Europe, large swaths of the southern city of Malmö, which is more than 25% Muslim, are no-go zones for non-Muslims. Fire and emergency workers, for example, refuse to enter Malmö's mostly Muslim Rosengård district without police escorts. The male unemployment rate in Rosengård is estimated to be above 80%. When firefighters attempted to put out a fire at Malmö's main mosque, they were attacked by stone throwers. According to the Malmö-based Imam Adli Abu Hajar, Sweden is the best Islamic state, occupation without tanks and soldiers, by Søren Kern, August 22, 2011. Most of the above-mentioned brief information about the atrocities of Islamic invasions is based on a lecture by Dr. Bill Warner. In the 548 battles waged by Muslim Mujahideen during the 500 years of spreading Islam, historians estimated that 272 million people were killed, of whom 80 million Hindus and 60 million Christians. Non-Muslims under Islamic rule. It is important to speak about the conditions of non-Muslims under Islamic rule. As I have already mentioned, Islam calls some people, such as the Jews and Christians, the people of the book, and as such they are allowed to follow their religions if they agree to pay the jizya and live as second citizens. The jizya literally means legal and religious penalty imposed by the Islamic law on the defeated people of the book. The people of the book is applied on Christians and Jews. Jews and Christians living in a Muslim countries are required by the Quran, Surah 9:29, to pay the jizya or else be killed if they refuse to embrace Islam. Christians and Jews are called the people of the book and also called the Tzimmis. Paying the jizya is a symbol of humiliation and submission because Tzimmis are not regarded as citizens of the Islamic State, although they are, in most cases, natives to the Muslim countries. Sheikh Naji Ibrahim ibn Abdullah summarizes the purpose of the jizya. He says, quoting Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, that the jizya is enacted, to spare the blood, of the Tzimmis, Jews and Christians, to be a symbol of humiliation of the infidels and as an insult and punishment to them, and as the Shafi'is indicate, the jizya is offered in exchange for residing in an Islamic country. Thus Ibn Qayyim adds, since the entire religion belongs to God, it aims at humiliating ungodliness and its followers, and insulting them. Imposing the jizya on the followers of ungodliness and oppressing them is required by God's religion. The Quranic text hints at this meaning when it says, until they give the tribute by force with humiliation, Quran, Surah 9, 29. According to Muslim jurists, the following legal ordinances must be enforced on Psimis, Christians and Jews, who reside among Muslims. 1. Psimis are not allowed to build new churches, temples, or synagogues. They are allowed to renovate old churches or houses of worship provided they do not allow to add any new construction. Old churches are those which existed prior to Islamic conquests and are included in a peace accord by Muslims. Construction of any church, temple, or synagogue in the Arab Peninsula is prohibited. It is the land of the Prophet and only Islam should prevail there. Yet, Muslims, if they wish, are permitted to demolish all non-Muslim houses of worship in any land they conquer. 2. Psimis are not allowed to pray or read their sacred books out loud at home or in churches, lest Muslims hear their prayers. 3. Psimis are not allowed to print their religious books or sell them in public places and markets. They are allowed to publish and sell them among their own people, in their churches and temples. 4. Psimis are not allowed to install the cross on their houses or churches since it is a symbol of infidelity. 5. Psimis are not permitted to broadcast or display their ceremonial religious rituals on radio or television or to use the media or to publish any picture of their religious ceremonies in newspaper and magazines. 6. Psimis are not allowed to congregate in the streets during their religious festivals, rather, each must quietly make his way to his church or temple. 7. Psimis are not allowed to join the army unless there is indispensable need for them, in which case they are not allowed to assume leadership positions but are considered mercenaries. By the Muslim historian Makrizi, Muslim doctrine concerning churches. Sharia law is draconian if not hostile to Christian worship. Consider the words of some of Islam's most authoritative and classic jurists, the same ones revered today by Egypt's Salafi. According to Ibn Qayyim, author of the multi-volume Rules for the Psimis, it is obligatory to destroy or convert into a mosque every church, both old and new, that exists on lands that were taken by Muslims through force, for they breed corruption. Even if Muslims are not sure whether one of these things, churches, is old pre-conquest or new, it is better to err on the side of caution, treat it as new, and demolish it. Likewise, Ibn Taymiyyah confirms that the ulama scholars of the Muslims from all four schools of law, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, and others, including Al-Thawri, Al-Layth, all the way back to the companions of the Prophet, and the followers are all agreed that if the Imam destroys every church in lands taken by force, through jihad, such as Egypt, Sudan, Iraq, Syria, this would not be deemed unjust of him, adding that, if Christians resist, they forfeit their covenant, their lives, and their possessions. Elsewhere he writes, wherever Muslims live and have mosques, it is impermissible for any sign of infidelity to be present, churches or otherwise. Echoing the words of the jurists that the church is worse than bars and brothels and houses of torment and fire, in August 2009, Dar al-Ifta, an Al-Azhar University affiliate, issued a fatwa likening the building of a church to a nightclub, a gambling casino, or building a barn for rearing pigs, cats, or dogs. In July 2012, Dr. Yasir al-Burhami, a prominent figure in Egypt's Salaf movement, issued a fatwa forbidding Muslim taxi drivers and bus drivers from transporting Coptic Christian priests to their churches, which he depicted as more forbidden than taking someone to a liquor bar. When it comes to churches, Islamic history is a testimony to Islamic doctrine. Under Muslim rule, from the 7th century to the present, tens of thousands of churches that were once spread across thousands of miles of formerly Christian lands, were attacked, plundered, ransacked, destroyed or converted into mosques. Such a large number is consistent with the fact that, at the time of the Muslim conquests, invasions, half of the world's entire Christian population lived in those lands invaded and subjugated by Islam. According to one medieval Muslim historian, over the 2-year course of a particularly ruthless Christian persecution campaign, some 30,000 churches were burned or pillaged in Egypt and Syria alone. Major church attacks during Abbasid rule include when the Muslims in Jerusalem made a rising in 936 and burnt down the Church of the Resurrection, which believed to be built atop the tomb of Christ, which they plundered, and destroyed all they could of it. Nearly a century later, Caliph Hakim by Amrullah, 996-1021 AD, ordered that the already ravaged Church of the Resurrection be torn down to its very foundations, apart from what could not be destroyed or pulled up, and they also destroyed the Golgotha and the Church of Saint Constantine and all that they contained, as well as all the sacred gravestones. They even tried to dig up the graves and wipe out all traces of their existence. The arrival of Muslim Mujahideen in Egypt in the 7th century caused a Coptic paradigm shift. The history, or plight, of Egypt's Coptic Orthodox Church is well preserved. The history of the Patriarchate of the Egyptian Church, for instance, a multi-volume chronicle begun under Coptic Bishop Severus ibn al-Muqaffa in the 10th century, records innumerable massacres and persecutions over the centuries, from destroyed churches, to crucified Christians, to raped and murdered nuns. Nevertheless, to bypass the objection that Christian writers may have been biased against their persecutors, let us content ourselves with the famous history of Taqi al-Din al-Makrizi, 1364–1442 AD, the most authoritative Muslim scholar of Egyptian history in the Middle Ages. His account appears especially objective when one considers that the pious Muslim Makrizi was no friend to the Christians. For example, after recounting centuries of persecution and church destruction at the hands of Muslims, Makrizi concludes by sounding like a modern-day Salaf, blaming Christians for their own persecution, for from the traces they left, would then be seen how shamefully they intrigued against Islamism and the followers of it, as anyone may know who looks into the lowness of their origin, and the old hatred of their ancestors towards our religion and the doings thereof. In Makrizi's account, things appear relatively quiet during the 1st century of Islam's occupation of Egypt, 641 to 741, no doubt due to the fact that Christians still numerically overwhelmed their Muslim conquerors. By 767, after decades of Coptic uprisings in face of abuses, heavier hardships than ever fell upon the Christians, who were obliged to eat their dead, while their new churches in Egypt were destroyed. The Church of Marianent alongside that of Abu Sanuda in Egypt was also pulled down, as well as that in the ward of Constantine, which the Christians entreated Suleiman ibn Ali, Emir of Egypt, to spare for 50,000 dinars, but he would not. By 845, al-Mutawakkil ordered Christian churches to be pulled down. In 912, the great church in Alexandria, known as that of the Resurrection, was burnt down. In 939, the Muslims made another rising in the city of Ascalon, where they demolished the Greek Church of Mary, and plundered what was in it. Then comes the era of the aforementioned Caliph Hakim by Amrullah, who decimated the Church of the Resurrection in Jerusalem. In the words of al-Makrizi, and in al-Hakim's time, hardships such as one never saw befell the Christians. He then laid his hands on all endowments of the churches and of the monasteries, which he confiscated to the public treasury, and wrote to that effect to all his provinces. He then burnt the wood of a great many crosses, and forbade the Christians to buy men or maidservants which were often set free. He pulled down the churches that were in the street Rashida, outside the city of Misr, Old Cairo. He then laid in ruins the churches of Al-Maks outside Cairo, and made over their contents to the people, who plundered them of more goods than can be told. He threw down the convent of Al-Qasir, and gave it to the people to sack. He then set about demolishing all churches, and made over to the people as prey and forfeit, all that was in them, and all that was settled on them. They were then all demolished, all their furniture and chattels were plundered, their endowments were forfeited to others, and mosques were built in their place. He allowed the call to prayer from the church of Sanuda in Misr, and built a wall around the church of Molyaka, the hanging church, in Kasr-esh-Sima, the palace of heaven. Then many Muslims sent up letters to request to be allowed to search the churches and monasteries in provinces of Egypt. But their request was hardly delivered at headquarters, when a favorable answer was returned to the request, so they took the vessels and chattels of the churches and of the monasteries, and sold them in the marketplaces of Egypt, together with what they found in those churches of gold and silver vessels, and things of the kind, and bartered their endowments. The Emir, the Caliph, also wrote to the intendants of the provinces to support the Muslims in their destruction of the churches and of monasteries. And the work of demolition in Egypt was so general in the year 1012, that according to statements on which one can rely, as to what was demolished at the end of the year 1014, both in Egypt and in Syria and the provinces thereof, of temples built by the Greeks it amounted to more than 3,000 churches, the original Arabic says 30,000. All the gold and silver vessels in them were plundered, their endowments were forfeited, and those endowments were splendid and bestowed on wonderful edifices. Finally, after describing different forms of persecutions against Christians during Hakim's reign, Makrizi, the Muslim historian, makes an interesting observation: under these circumstances a great many Christians became Muslims. In another place, after recounting how the greater number of the churches of the Said, the Upper Egypt had been pulled down, and mosques built in their stead, the historian notes again the typical consequence: more than 450 Christians became Muslims in one day. It bears repeating that the Muslim Makrizi had no great love for Egypt's Christians, and made disparaging observations concerning them in his volumes, thereby making his account of persecution all the more trustworthy. Because Hakim's persecution was so terrible and far-reaching, most modern Western historians acknowledge it, even as they portray it as an aberration of a madman, implying that Christians suffered only under his rule. Yet there is no dearth of Muslim leaders throughout the whole of Islamic history that did not at one time or another persecute Christians and their churches. If Hakim is remembered as a terrible and insane tyrant, consider Caliph Harun al-Rashid, who in the West is depicted as a colorful and fun-loving prankster in the Arabian Nights, 1001 Arabian Nights. Though renowned for his secular pursuits including riotous living, strong drink, and harems of concubines, to the point that a modern-day female Kuwaiti activist referred to him as a model to justify the institution of sex slavery, the Caliph Harun al-Rashid was still pious enough to force Christians to distinguish themselves by dress, to expel them from their positions, and to destroy their churches through the use of fatwas by the imams. Similarly, Saladin, another Muslim ruler who is habitually portrayed in the West as magnanimous and tolerant, commanded that all crucifixes on Coptic church domes be destroyed, and that whoever saw that the outside of a church was white, to cover it with black dirt, as a sign of degradation. Indeed, in 1354, well after the mad Caliph Hakim was gone, churches were still under attack, including by Muslim mobs, who, according to Makrizi, demolished a church anent the Bridge of Lions, and a church in the street El-Ashra in Misr, and the church of Fahadin within the precincts of Cairo, also the convent of Nia in Giza, and a church in the neighborhood of Batak al-Takruni. They plundered the wealth of the churches they demolished, which was great, and carried away even the woodwork and slabs of alabaster. They rushed upon the churches of Misr, Egypt, and Cairo. From the time the Ottoman Turks first set foot in Thrace under Suleiman, son of Orhan, the empire rapidly disintegrated. From the very beginning of the Turkish onslaught under Suleiman, the Turks tried to consolidate their position by the forcible imposition of Islam. The Ottoman historian, Sakrullah, maintained, those who refused to accept the Muslim faith were slaughtered and their families enslaved. Where there were bells, writes the same author, Suleiman broke them up and cast them onto fires. Where there are churches, he destroyed them or converted them into mosques. Thus, in place of bells there were now muezzins. Wherever Christian infidels were still found, vassalage was imposed upon their rulers. At least in public they could no longer say Kyrie eleison, but rather there is no God but Allah, and where once their prayers had been addressed to Christ, they were now to Mohammed, the Prophet of Allah, Apostolos Evangeliopoulos, a Greek writer and historian. Such was the state of affairs of churches under Islam, explaining how, over the course of nearly 14 centuries, former centers of Christianity like Egypt, Levant, and Anatolia were reduced to sporadic enclaves that came to resemble dilapidated strongholds of Christianity surrounded by a sea of Muslim hostility. According to the historian Bat Yair, Christians and Jews living in a Muslim country are subjected to discriminative rules that meant to dehumanize them. Rules for the Tzimis, Christians and Jews. Rules would be formulated to deny the Tzimi the due process of the law. Discriminative and restrictive dress and behavior codes would be enacted and severely enforced to reduce the Tzimi into a state of despair and poverty. Dehumanization of the Tzimi was not uncommon, and generally the rule. Various forms of physical abuses were common. Many times distinctive dress specified to identify the Tzimi that he would be unable to either mix with a Muslim or even walk in a Muslim area of the city. Other rules specified such as demeaning codes dress such as no allowed to wear shoes or sandals, not using certain colors, wearing stars on their clothing. Tzimis were prohibited from working in many occupations. Even rules were made as how a Tzimi could ride a mule to distinguish him from a Muslim. Non-observance of these rules would entail a severe beating. Often passing a Muslim on the wrong side would begin a beating that could leave the Tzimi mortally wounded. Since the Tzimi is denied the right to testify in court against a Muslim, there is absolutely no recourse. If the local Muslim population becomes intolerant or jealous of the successes of the Tzimis, then a pogrom would ensue. Tzimi communities could find themselves evicted, women raped, exorbitant ransoms placed on them, their children abducted and forced to convert to Islam, and in other cases mass murders of the Tzimi population condoned. Hindus under Islamic rule. The Prophet Muhammad promised his followers that they would conquer India. His hadiths that speak of the conquest of India are as follows. It was narrated that Thaba'an, the freed slave of the Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, said, "There are two groups of my ummah, Islamic community, whom Allah would protect from the fire, a group who would conquer India, and a group who would be with Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus the son of Mary, peace be upon him." Narrated by Imam Ahmed in al-Musnad, it was narrated that Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, said, "The Messenger of Allah, blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, promised us that we would conquer India, so if I am martyred I would be among the best of the martyrs, and if I return then I am Abu Hurairah the freed, protected from hellfire." Alain Danilo writes, from the time Muslims started arriving, around 632 AD, the history of India becomes a long, monotonous series of murders, massacres, spoliations, and destructions. It is, as usual, in the name of a holy war of their faith, of their sole God, that the barbarians have destroyed civilizations, wiped out entire races. Mahmud Ghazni was an early example of Muslim ruthlessness, burning in 1018 of the temples of Mathura, razing Kanauj to the ground and destroying the famous temple of Somnath, sacred to all Hindus. His successors were as ruthless as Ghazni. 103 temples in the holy city of Benares were razed to the ground, its marvelous temples destroyed, its magnificent palaces wrecked. The Hindu sage Padmanabha described in his Kanhadade Prabandha in 1456 AD the story of the Muslim invasion of the Gujarat state of 1298 AD. The conquering army burnt villages, devastated the land, plundered people's wealth, took Brahmins and children and women of all classes captive, flogged with thongs of raw hide, carried a moving prison with it, and converted the prisoners into obsequious slaves. The blood of the infidels flowed so copiously at Thainsar that the stream was discolored, notwithstanding its purity, and people were unable to drink it. The Sultan returned with plunder which is impossible to count. Tariq-i-Yamini Avat by the Sultan's secretary written in the 11th century. The magnitude of crimes credited to Muslim monarchs by the medieval Muslim historians, was beyond measure. With a few exceptions, Muslim kings and commanders were monsters who stopped at no crime when it came to their Hindu subjects. But what strikes as more significant is the broad pattern of those crimes. The pattern is that of a jihad in which the Ghazis, invaders, of Islam, 1. Invade infidel lands, 2. Massacre as many infidel men, women, and children, particularly Brahmins, as they like after winning a victory, 3. Capture the survivors to be sold as slaves, 4. Plunder every place and person, 5. Demolish idolatrous places of worship and build mosques in their places, and 6. Defile idols which are flung into public squares or made into steps leading to mosques. Still more significant is the fact that this is exactly the pattern, 1. Revealed by Allah in the Quran, 2. Practiced, perfected, and prescribed by the Prophet in his own lifetime, 3. Followed by the pious Caliphs of Islam in the first 35 years of Islamic imperialism, 4. Elaborated in the hadiths and hundreds of commentaries with meticulous attention to detail, 5. Certified by the ulama and the Sufis of Islam in all ages including our own, and 6. Followed by all Muslim monarchs and chieftains, who aspired for name and fame in this life, and houris and beardless boys hereafter. Goel, S.R., 2001. The Story of Islamic Imperialism in India. New Delhi, India. In the year 997 AD, a Turkish chieftain by the name of Mahmud became Sultan of the little state of Ghazni, in eastern Afghanistan. Pretending a holy zeal for destroying Hindu idolatry, Sultan Mahmud swept across the frontier with a force inspired by a pious aspiration for booty. He met the unprepared Hindus at Bhim Nagar, slaughtered them, pillaged their cities, destroyed their temples, and carried away the accumulated treasures of centuries. Returning to Ghazni, he astonished the ambassadors of foreign powers by displaying jewels and unbeard pearls and rubies shining like sparks, or like wine congealed with ice, and emeralds like fresh sprigs of myrtle, and diamonds in size and weight like pomegranates. Each winter Mahmud descended into India, filled his treasure chest with spoils, and amused his men with full freedom to pillage and kill. Each spring he returned to his capital richer than before. At Mathura, on the Jumna, he took from the temple its statues of gold encrusted with precious stones, and emptied its coffers of a vast quantity of gold, silver, and jewelry. He expressed his admiration for the architecture of the great shrine, judged that its duplication would cost 100 million dinars and the labor of 200 years, and then ordered it to be soaked with naphtha and burnt to the ground. 6 years later he sacked another opulent city of northern India, Somnath, killed all its 50,000 inhabitants, and dragged its wealth to Ghazni. In the end he became, perhaps, the richest king that history has ever known. Sometimes he spared the population of the ravaged cities, and took them home to be sold as slaves, but so great was the number of such captives that after some years no one could be found to offer more than a few shillings for a slave. Before every important engagement Mahmud knelt in prayer, and asked the blessing of God upon his arms. He reigned for a third of a century, and when he died, full of years and honors, Muslim historians ranked him as the greatest monarch of his time, and one of the greatest sovereigns of any age. In 1186 the Guri, a Muslim Turkish tribe of Afghanistan, invaded India, captured the city of Delhi, destroyed its temples, confiscated its wealth, and settled down in its palaces to establish the Sultanate of Delhi, an alien despotism fastened upon northern India for 3 centuries, and checked only by assassination and revolt. The first of these bloody sultans, Qutb-din Aibak, was a normal specimen of his kind, fanatical, ferocious, and merciless. His gifts, as the Mohammedan historian tells us, were bestowed by hundreds of thousands, and his slaughters likewise were by hundreds of thousands. In one victory of this warrior, who had been purchased as a slave, 50,000 men came under the collar of slavery, and the plain became black as pitch with Hindus. Another sultan, Balban, punished rebels and brigands by casting them under the feet of elephants, or removing their skins, stuffing these with straw, and hanging them from the gates of Delhi. When some Mongol inhabitants who had settled in Delhi, and had been converted to Islam, attempted a rising, Sultan Alauddin, the conqueror of Chittor, had all the males from 15 to 30,000 of them slaughtered in one day. Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq acquired the throne by murdering his father, became a great scholar and an elegant writer, dabbled in mathematics, physics, and Greek philosophy, surpassed his predecessors in bloodshed and brutality, fed the flesh of a rebel nephew to the rebel's wife and children, ruined the country with reckless inflation, and laid it waste with pillage and murder till the inhabitants fled to the jungle. He killed so many Hindus that, in the words of a Muslim historian, there was constantly in front of his royal pavilion and his civil court a mound of dead bodies and a heap of corpses, while the sweepers and executioners were wearied out by their work of dragging the victims and putting them to death in crowds. A clear example of the destruction of the Hindu and Buddhist cultures and their temples can be seen in the siege of Dibble by Muhammad bin Qasim, who marched into India with a large military expedition. In the latter part of the siege of Dibble, defectors informed Muhammad about how the temple could be captured. Following their information, the Arabs planted their ladders on the walls of the citadel and stormed over them. Once they took Dibble, the citizens were given the invitation to accept Islam, and upon refusal the males were slaughtered and the women and children were taken into slavery. The carnage lasted for 3 days, looting, plundering, and rape. Their temple was razed, and was replaced by a mosque. Muhammad left a garrison of 4,000 soldiers in the town. The spoils of conquest were divided first among the leadership and then the common soldiers, and this would be repeated again and again with continued Islamic conquests. As this was the pattern of all future sieges of Muhammad bin Qasim, as indeed of all future Muslim invaders of Hindustan, it may be repeated. Inhabitants of a captured fort or town were invited to accept Islam or face death. India would face 3 major invasions over the centuries, beginning with the Arabs and continuing with the Seljuk Turks in the 11th century AD. Over and over again the same scenario repeated itself, with those who converted being spared and those who did not accept the religion of peace being massacred or enslaved. In every case their temples were destroyed, along with all the idols within them, and the remains of the temple were used to build a mosque on the former temple site. Later Turkish invasions would even be more brutal. The Turkic Seljuk tribes who had converted to Islam were no less destructive to India's largely Hindu and Buddhist population. Like the Arabs, the Turks gave the same invitation to convert or die. These accounts proved to us that Islam is the bloodiest religion in human history. No other religion in the entire history of mankind in the planet Earth had come even remotely close to the mass murders, rapes, massacres, genocides, enslavements, destructions, and debris that the so-called religion of peace had done. The Bible said about them, "Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their paths. And the path of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes." Romans 3:15-17. Note that Islam is the youngest religion among the major religions of the world. Judaism came 2,200 years before Islam, Hinduism 1,700 years, Buddhism 1,200 years, and Christianity 700 years. And none of them had caused such destruction and misery in our world as Islam did and continues to do every day and every minute through the widely spread terrorist attacks and civil wars in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Tunisia, Yemen, Egypt, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nigeria, Somalia, and Sudan. Muslim terrorists are killing and terrorizing innocent people all over Europe and America. It all started by a single tyrant and demon-possessed man called Muhammad. Muslim historians do not hide the fact that Islam had spread by the sword. Muslim mujahideen had killed millions of infidels, looted their treasures, occupied their lands, enslaved their children, raped their women, and sold their women and children in the slave markets. To Muslims, the Islamic invasions are seen as acts of altruism. They are referred to as al-Futuhat al-Islamiyya, which literally means the Islamic openings, that is, the countries invaded and conquered were opened for the light of Islam to enter and guide its infidel inhabitants. Thus to Muslims, there is nothing to regret or apologize for concerning those bloody invasions. They are seen as for the good of those infidels who were defeated and forcibly Islamized.